Okay, broadcasting live.
Wonderful. Hello, my name is Emily Mabobi. I'm the chair of the Education Policy Committee, and I would like to bring the meeting to order. And I would like to start by reading the territorial acknowledgement. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. And with that, I will move us over to A2 on the agenda, approval of the Combined Education Policy and Directions and Operation Policy and Planning Committee's meeting agenda. I will, sorry, still new to this. Can I get a mover? See Trustee Duncan and a vote. And it looks like it passes.
Sorry,
please.
Chair, I have an amendment request.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry, and that is to move L3 custodial review from facilities planning L to I2 under superintendent's report, just bumping it up to facilitate an earlier end to the evening for some of our staff.
And can I get a vote on that then?
Yeah.
All in favor? And it looks like that passes unanimously. So item L2 will be moved to I2. And from there, can I get a vote for approval of the agenda? And that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Chair, just a point of order, just to remind folks that only the trustees on this committee would be voting for anything to do with the ed policy agenda, and then we'll swap once we get to operations. Then all the voting members of operations will vote on that.
Awesome, thank you, Trustee Duncan. The next item on the agenda, B1, is approval of the minutes. And can I get a mover? Trustee Duncan moves, and a vote. And that passes. And is there any business arising from the minutes? Trustee McNally?
I zipped in and out of the meeting here, and that's my fault. I wonder if we did the territorial acknowledgement.
Yes.
Did we do it? Okay, I'm sorry. Things were happening here and I missed it. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you. No worries. And if there's no business arising from the minutes, I'd like to move us to item C1, Framework for Enhancing Student Learning, December 5th memo, and I'll pass it over to Superintendent Whitten.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll introduce. This evening we will hear from Charmaine Short, who is the acting district principal and is fulfilling the added responsibility of the environmental scan in combination with the team's early years portfolio. And we'll hear from acting principal Short with regards to sharing new and ongoing provincial and district early learning and childcare initiatives that we are working through, as well as she will provide an update on changes within the ministry, specifically the merge of the childcare into the education sector, so the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And lastly, she'll discuss the current operations of childcare on the school sites and the next steps for early learning and childcare within the Greater Victoria School District. So without any further delay, I will pass this over to Charmaine Short.
Thank you. Let's just share my screen here. Does that work for everybody? Perfect.
Looks
Thank
good.
you. Great. Yeah, great. Good evening. And thank you so much for including me this evening. I welcome every opportunity to shine light on our littlest learners. So it is really wonderful to see you all. I've not met each of you. So again, my name is Charmaine, and thank you to Deb for the introduction. I really appreciated meeting some of you at Cedar Hill in the welcome evening. So thank you for being there. Tonight, I am going to try to synthesize some of what is going on in the early years. And we have some wonderful strengths to celebrate. We have a few pebbles along our path that we are navigating, and I would like to share that. And of great importance, where are we going, right? And what is informing the next steps and hopes of what is to come in early learning and childcare in the Greater Victoria School District. And I'm here alongside Marnie, Vistas and Harwood, and incredibly grateful to have Marnie to travel with along this path. So thank you to Marnie. All right, let's dive in. So to ground this conversation, I want to think about what connects us, my work to your work. And really, it's simple. It's the children, right? We are all here to better life possibilities and opportunities for the children we serve. And our role as team is to operationalize the board's strategic plan through guidelines set out by the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So first, I'd like to share with you the guiding documents that offer the pedagogy for educators to facilitate and lead learning in British Columbia. So the goals of the strategic plan really are activated through experiences grounded in the principles within the early learning framework. And this is the document there's on the left, and it was a ministry document rolled out in 2019. And the First People's Principles of Learning on the right are embedded into the early learning framework. So this framework really serves as an approach to explore the curriculum and the core competencies within classrooms. And it provides a holistic look at children and how they learn. And the language and principles in this document, it beautifully complement the goals and strategies of the strategic plan. So together they work really in concert to offer us a platform for all the planning and work we do in the early years. I'd like to dive deeper into that framework in just a moment, but before doing so, I thought it would be great to think about who do we serve in early learning and childcare, and ultimately what makes up early learning and childcare in our district. Because this whole conversation includes a great number of people. Early learning and childcare serves children from birth to age 8. And so, as you may know, there's been a huge transformation in the structure of the Ministry of Education by merging childcare from the Ministry of Children and Family Development into the Ministry of Education. And I'm definitely going to speak more about that. Obviously, that change is hugely significant to the work that we are doing as we move forward. But in many ways, since the last time I was here sharing with you, we've added a whole community to our existing community, right? Children and families and educators within the childcare sector have been welcomed into the education system. And when we think of one learning community, you see it at the bottom of our screen, all these presentations. Essentially, our community is expanding, right? Both in numbers and specialness or exceptionality. So moving forward, really, it's going to be important to structure our planning around this fourth level, right? We have elementary, middle, secondary, and now we have early learning and childcare officially included in the education system's configuration. It's pretty exciting. So what makes up early learning and childcare? We are 21 childcare sites on school grounds, and close to 2,000 children are receiving care on their school sites. And of course, we are the educators and staff who provide the care. We are 6 Strong Start centers, welcoming children and families from 0 to 5. We are nearly 1,400 kindergarten students and just over 4,500 grade 1 to 3 students, right? This includes 431 Indigenous children representing 4 houses. So all of these 7,900 children's families and caregivers, of course, also integral to the early care and learning community. So we are administrators, teachers, educational assistants, early childhood educators and support staff, serving and supporting all of these classrooms. And we are community partners who graciously work alongside us to strengthen our system. We are a district administrator, lucky for me, who gets to bridge all of these beautiful people together and build the connections as an early learning community. Really, it's an exciting and incredible opportunity to be preparing and moving and fostering this endeavor alongside the Indigenous Education Department and the district team. And really instrumental to childcare is our magnificent facilities department. So as I work to build connections, Mark and Marnie and team work to build buildings. So incredible work there. So really, when I'm sharing with you this evening, I want to bring all of these people into the sharing. Early years educators show up every day, committed to nurturing the hearts and minds of thousands of children we serve, right? And I have so much gratitude for and pride in being part of this early learning community. So back to the early learning framework, now that you have all the people connected to this work, to zoom in a little closer, I'd like to highlight the connection in alignment between both the strategic plan and our district framework for enhancing learning, or FESL, that Tammy and Shelley presented last month, and connecting that to the principles found within the early learning framework. Because when we talk about becoming an educated citizen, again, that Tammy and Shelley shared about last month, being that students exit our system with the knowledge and skills and attitudes needed to contribute to a healthy society, that big work begins right here, right in the early years. And there's an incredible through line that connects us all. So the early learning framework connects the early years community from birth to 8, right? We have a responsibility to learn and understand and activate these principles. And in doing so, we are equipping each child with the skills and tools they need along their path. So this is really important work. And just like I would do in a classroom when we have something big to introduce, we often break it down into smaller parts and scaffold the growth. So I outlined a few of the principles that we've really been focusing on and embedding with intention into all of our communication, our professional learning, our structural planning, really taking place across the district in early years. And I think it's very valuable to take some time to think about these principles. I'd like to go through each of the highlighted ones. They're just words on a page unless we really start to think about what they feel like in a classroom, because each one of them is truly transformational. And when we think of system change and education being reframed as a birth to grade 12 system, really we all need to be leaning into these principles. I think for some educators, it can be a really significant shift. So we move cautiously and compassionately, and also with great tenacity, right? We know that children are best served when these principles are alive in their classrooms. All right, so we're going to think about these together. The first one I have highlighted there is children are strong, capable in their uniqueness, and full of potential. So what does that feel like in a classroom? And when you believe that, you really see it. You notice and draw on strengths, and your classroom becomes strong, right? So when we speak of creating from the strategic plan inclusive and culturally responsive classrooms, goal 1, it starts with distinguishing each child as an individual and not only believing in them, but empowering them with high expectations and engaging joyful learning. And joyful learning, play, their second one. Play is integral to well-being and learning. When we speak, again, of creating inclusive and culturally responsive spaces, play is integral. Play is a universal language, and it's an inclusive language that allows for all children to enter into learning in their own way. It's a means to communicate thoughts and feelings and experiences, and a way to explore the core competencies and the curriculum. And it's really a powerful way to learn about ourselves and how the world works. So play requires continuous reciprocal interactions. Relationships. I mean, this is it, right? Relationships are everything. And I would bet that most of your best school memories are relationship based, right? So what does this feel like in a classroom? The focus of our professional learning has been on building stronger connections and a sense of belonging through relationship and play. And that can mean something as simple as greeting every child every day by name as they enter in to the day's work, as a measure to start fostering attuned relationships. And it can mean something more complex, like getting to know each learner in each child in a way that our understanding of them and our attentiveness to their uniqueness really empowers them to push themselves to their individual potential and try new things or teach their gifts to others, right? Learning is holistic, reflective, experiential, and relational. And I always think this principle sort of is a package of all the other principles. It reminds us of how interconnected all of what we do is. And really, as an example, how this shows up, being reflexive is about growing from what we already know. So about truly getting to know our students and being responsive to who they are and how they learn, and designing lessons and inquiries that build on existing knowledge. And we do this in partnership and in relationship. So this is the work, right? And it's not only these principles that inform and guide our planning and structures and supports. We also glean from data, right? National, provincial, and local data, and the voices of our staff and students, really to offer a fulsome picture of how our students are doing in all areas of development. I think collaboration with our district team, information from the Indigenous Ed department, the Inclusive Ed department, our kindergarten teachers, our students, their families, French pathways and partnership, what's going on in all areas of a student's lives and school journeys has everything to do with early years, right? So we can take the data and build on its strengths. Sometimes we need to move upstream and develop proactive measures. How can we better serve our children in early years to equip them for that pathway to come? So let's take a look at some data points here. Here is the most recent early development instrument data known as the EDI. And this data is collected and synthesized through the Human Early Learning Partnership known as HELP at UBC. And kindergarten teachers across the district and province take time to answer questionnaires about each of their students. We participate in this every 2 years. And so the data from the most recent report shines light on information collected between 2019 and 2022, right? And it's showing us that 1 in 3 children are vulnerable on one or more areas of development, and the development areas are listed there. So it's hard to take that in. Vulnerable children are those who, without additional support and care, are more likely to experience challenges in their school years and beyond. So each vulnerability becomes our priority. And children who experience these vulnerabilities become our priority students, right? So we have to work smart, and we have to move upstream when we see data like this. I think there's been a particular increase in vulnerability in communication skills, for an example. And this has a lot to do with disruption in community services, specifically speech and language, or access to childcare and preschool during the pandemic. And also research is starting to emerge about how mask wearing hindered oral language development and communication. We know that children are having just less conversation, right? And maybe more screen time. So in response, all of our professional learning really has been sharing and centered around play-based opportunities that enliven oral language. So again, the data is continually informing our work. And the professional learning opportunities we offer are to all of our care providers, 0 to 5, and teachers and support staff. And we also host parent evenings at local preschools to increase that personal connection to our schools and share these ideas and strategies to nurture growth and development prior to coming to school. So this picture here shows the story making kits we created for each school with stories and lessons and ideas to encourage play and oral language development. Oh, this one, I always have a hard time reading it. So UNICEF report card, it compares the world's wealthiest nations in child well-being under the premise that countries with similar resources and capacities should achieve similar results for children. And the top performing countries, you know, really set the bar for what is achievable and help us understand how to get there. So this data has only recently been released, and Canada is among a handful of countries really with the best conditions for growing up, but some of the poorest outcomes for children when it comes to mental health and happiness. And overall, Canada ranks 31st in mental health and happiness among 38 of the world's richest countries. And this is national data, so we have to think in our local context. However, it does paint a picture to us of what our focus can be. And I don't know, I have to sit with that, because our wealth as a country is not translating into the best possible outcomes for children. So again, that question that continually guides the work, and I recognize is instrumental in your planning, is how can we better serve our youngest learners by making proactive choices and really redirect these stories. It's all of this is telling us that many of our children's lives are complex and challenging and actually even unhappy. And so what is the root of this unhappiness or vulnerability? We know that stress in families is a huge contributor, and increased cost of living and access to affordable childcare that we're really going to dig into this evening, to name a few. But one significant factor, in particular, I think inhibiting mental wellness, is reduced imaginative play in early childhood. And this graph was shared by Jane Bertrand, who is a Canadian researcher in the field of early learning. And her graph shows the correlation between play opportunities and mental wellness challenges for children since the 1960s. So you can find yourself on that graph and see if it connects to your experience. But when we define play in this context, I think we really have to think about imaginative play, you know, both at home and at school. This is about children being children and exploring the world and making meaning and discovering who they are. And I think this graph also shares a story about access, because access to play-based early learning is a contributor. When children turn 5, right, going into kindergarten, they all have access to publicly funded education. But before 5, so from birth to 5, each child's opportunity to experience some of these rich opportunities is dictated by access or affordability. And there's a huge inequity here, and hopefully we're addressing that in what's to come. I'll just let you sit with some of that. There's some happy stories. Here's one. This is where Strong Start comes in, right? Because when I talk about equity of opportunity and play and discovery and happiness and joy, I think of our 6 Strong Start centers. Strong Start really is all of these things wrapped up with a big hug. Relationships, connection, attunement, play, belonging, these beautiful facets are a natural and integral part of what Strong Start is. And after that disheartening data, here is a breath of fresh air, and it's about accessible and affordable quality play opportunities, and it's free to families. So I really want to highlight Strong Start because it is a celebration. It's where it all begins for many of the children and families in the Greater Victoria School District. Children attend Strong Start with their parent or caregiver, and they're welcomed into Strong Start by the facilitator, who's an early childhood educator or an ECE, specially trained in early child development and play-based learning. And when families are experiencing times of vulnerability, the early childhood educator can work with them to find pathways to services and access relevant supports. And best of all, they play and learn and share in a snack together. And so it's just a hidden gem and truly a proactive initiative, right? It's really a model for continuity of care from early care to kindergarten. I really encourage you to visit a Strong Start, and I also encourage all families with young children to do the same. I think the mental health and happiness data really sits on my heart and our hearts, and it illuminates the importance of actualizing the principles of the early learning framework in with the board's work in the strategic plan, especially that play is integral to well-being and learning. And so that levity and importance of adding layers of support and nurture in the early years is essential. Strong Start is exactly that, and we've been trying to extend this strength. So gleaning from that strength of the Strong Starts and reflecting again on the story the data is telling us, we continue to work towards adding a layer of love and warmth and joy and happiness and opportunity, right, to our kindergarten classrooms. So one way we've been adding this layer is by creating early years partnerships. And partnerships are where an early childhood educator or an ECE and a teacher come together, right? So 2 skilled educators providing that wraparound in a classroom. It's an example of a proactive initiative. I've included more information about it in the pack-up this evening, so I encourage you to take a look. But briefly, we started including early childhood educators into classrooms where neighborhoods had the highest percentage of kindergarten students who are vulnerable in one or more, according to the EDI. And so we currently have 11 early childhood educators working in kindergarten classrooms. And again, we really hope to extend this and grow this initiative. We can make a difference here. Another data point really fundamental to our planning in the early years is the Indigenous grad rate data. Goal number 2 of the board's strategic plan asks us to look at the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous completion rates. We have a commitment and a responsibility to address these inequities. And really, it is in the early years that this pathway and journey begins, right? We can't set our hopes on improving Indigenous grad rates until we look at the entire pathway and to improve children's educational outcomes and the outcomes of all students, we have to examine our systems and in relationship make shifts. I want to explore a shift because we often talk about shifts and what does that look like? All right, so when I went to school, and maybe you relate, we all read the same books, right? We were all handed the same worksheets. We all wrote about the same prescribed topics and so on. And this was like giving everyone exactly the same pair of shoes. So when we are all presented with the same shoes and we're expected to travel along the educational path in that one size fits all shoe, that's when the engagement can drop off, the attendance wanes, that sense of mattering and significant dwindles. So first and foremost, to be truly culturally responsive means that the child, the recipients of the service, feel seen and heard and understood and feel significant and have purpose and see themselves in the learning, right? So going back to our very first principle, children are strong, capable in their uniqueness and full of potential. When we make meaning from that and we bring that principle to life, it means that children are invited to bring their whole selves to school. And they bring with them the relationships that they have with their families and communities. They bring with them their stories, their interests, their curiosities, their personality, their family background, right? Their abilities. And when we embrace that, equity starts to take shape in our classrooms. And equity in classrooms means that every child gets a shoe that fits, right? A pathway that fits. So we know better and we can do better. And we need to find every child's shoes that fit. So every child has the opportunity to flourish, right? Because we know when we're flourishing, our mental health and happiness increases and our sense of purpose increases. And this is how we change the story. So how do we find the best fit, right? Again, it's circling back through relationship. And we get to know our students. There is no other way to offer shoes that fit than to find out the best fit. And there's no YouTube for that and no downloadable. That's the hard work of every educator in the district. And for us to be truly one learning community, we all need to be wearing shoes that fit. So to help us find best fit, we really deeply listen to our children and their families and caregivers and community. I have regular meetings with our Indigenous Ed department and our community partners, and together we're co-creating systems that represent the voices of our families and our partners and our community. And as we move the strategic plan forward of the board, the systems and structures that ensure cultural relevance for the children and families we serve is essential, right? I'm going to speak to a few of the structures and systems that we've been collaborating on. It's really not flashy work, but it's absolutely foundational to where we need to go and how we're trying to move along in a good way. So thank you for your great listening. I think all of these works really are a response to the experience of the recipients, and which is really vital to strengthening that infrastructure that supports early learning. All right, and these are all living documents, so we continue to grow them and better them and strengthen them. What keeps these the same is that we're really going for consistent, inclusive language from which to work together. So on the left here, we have the welcoming kindergarten children and families. And that's really a process. I'm going to go into more detail, but that was co-created alongside our inclusive ed department, our Indigenous ed department, and the community partners that I have the privilege of working with, the Victoria Native Friendship Center, the Intercultural Association, and the Fernwood Neighborhood Resource Group. The second document shown there is the Early Childhood Educators in Primary Classrooms. And that is a document that was co-created alongside our early childhood educators for early childhood educators. And it's to help the early childhood educators and the school staff understand and offer clarity to their role and how to work together as a early years partnership. The Strong Start that I mentioned, I'm so grateful for the IT Tech for Learning department working alongside them and their genius in trying to reduce the steps and barriers in registering for Strong Start. We want to make it as accessible as possible to all families. It's a free service. and you need to register for it. So just streamlining that registration and so we can welcome our families in as best we can. And lastly, the childcare manual, really created before my time with facilities, and then adapted and co-created together with Marnie as I entered the scene to offer the language between our care providers and our school administrators so that there's a place to go with everybody has consistency and clarity in role. And again, foundational to equity and inclusion. I want to take a look at an example, dive a little deeper into one of these systems or structures that I'm talking about. And so when we think of the goal, create inclusive and culturally responsive learning environments that will support and improve all learners' personal and academic success, we lean into that through our welcome process. And I think often known as the transition into kindergarten, dun, 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 we call it the welcome process, right? This is a system that's been developed, a process really, and again, in partnership. And the question we asked ourselves is, how can we strengthen transition into kindergarten for all? And I can't make that decision for 1,400 children and their families. This is about the recipients of the process and their feedback and how we can make it more welcoming and positive. So we're working towards a process that involves increased personal connections, I guess, and conversations to build those essential relationships right from the get-go. I think most importantly, or most meaningfully, we're working towards moving away from checklists for readiness. Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Are you ready for kindergarten? Instead, the welcome process is becoming an opportunity to just warmly welcome new kindergarten children and their families. And instead of asking, are you ready for kindergarten? We're asking ourselves, are we ready for kindergarten, right? The students are coming. Our role is to prepare the environment and get to know each child so that we can offer them shoes that fit. All right, the childcare vision has a whole lot to do with easing the transition for children and families into school. And the merge of childcare into the educational system is a transformational step towards improving outcomes for children. And this is the grand finale, so good job. So I know it's a lot, you're doing great. So childcare as a sector has now fully merged into the Ministry of Education, as I mentioned. So I want to offer some insight into that amalgamation, because we now work under the umbrella of the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And the ministry continues to roll out the 10-year childcare vision. So just briefly, why the merge maybe, or about the vision? I think in 2018, the ministry created a 10-year childcare plan, right? And this is called the BC Childcare Vision. The vision was created because of the incredible shortage of childcare in BC. And provincially, less than half of children who require childcare have access to it or can afford it. So when you think back to the data that I've been sharing, the light bulbs go on, right? How have these huge inequities in early care and learning contributed to this data? So here we are moving towards a better outcome. I think the main purpose of the plan is to establish a universal childcare for BC and to reduce stress and barriers for families. Ultimately, a plan where every family who needs childcare has access to inclusive, affordable, quality care. I think ultimately childcare will become a core service, right? Just like K to 12, and for $10 a day or less for all children. It's a bold vision. BC is leading the way, and it will take incredible work, effort, and tenacity to bring to life, and we can do it. So looking at this little bridge here, that's just to offer that seamless entry into K, right? The vision aspires to offer a seamless pedagogy from early care to kindergarten and through the early learning framework. So that's why that is the connector for all of us. And those early childhood educators working in the childcare sites then are the conduit into that transition. So they're vital to the success. And I think to Action Universal Childcare, the ministry really has been offering multiple grants to support the efforts in increasing space and staff recruitment. And right now in my role, funded and directed by the ministry, we're examining the big picture and really taking a focused look at the synergies and overlaps and gaps in the school site care, childcare, preschool, and before and after care. And we're connecting with the care providers to learn about the spaces, to learn about their wait lists and their pebbles in the road, because we know that there are two ingredients to universal care, right? Space and staff. So to offer the quality care. And both of these are at a premium. So this truly is a simultaneous endeavor and an ambitious endeavor, right? Staff and space. And one way we're working towards recruiting more staff, specifically early childhood educators, thanks to the incredible work of Lindsay Johnson and the Pathways and Partnership team. Funding has been received through the Early Childhood Education Dual Credit Grant to create opportunities for grade 12 students to begin their early learning and care pathway, right? So our hope is that through this program, we can increase the number of early childhood educators in our community to provide childcare, especially to those on school sites. And speaking of the care on our school sites, Marnie is here to share about the space aspect of universal care. And really, I have to say, because she won't say it, this is another celebration in this presentation, because over the past 2 years, we've added close to 600 spaces for children in our school communities. And this is thanks to Marnie and the incredible work of the facilities department. So we have many districts across the province looking to us to learn about the structure and process to grow these initiatives. So I'm going to let Marnie take it away to share about the childcare that's growing. And Marnie, just let me know when you'd like me to move the slide forward.
Next slide, I guess. Hi, everybody. Then this slide is just a little bit of an overview so far. So the school district has been very, very fortunate to actually have received funding from the Ministry of Education and Childcare to expand childcare on 21 district sites. So to date, 10 of the sites, you can see the completed sites there. So 10 of the sites have actually been completed. The majority of them have 2 childcare units on site, with Macaulay having the 1 childcare unit. And each unit has its own kitchen. It has the appropriate number of bathrooms for the number of participants. That's per the licensing requirements. It has an interior open play space and an exterior fenced in play space for the little guys. 7 of the 10 sites are licensed to date, with the other 3 sites just in the process of licensing. It's a little bit of a process. And on your right-hand side, the 11 remaining sites are in process in some form or another. We're either building them or they're in consultation process or waiting for building permits. Next slide, please. So currently the school district has been approved to date for the new childcare spaces on the 21 sites as listed on the last slide. This translates into 1,043 new spaces, ranging from birth to school age spaces. There are 678 spaces that are grandfathered. That means that we're required to accommodate the spaces for the next 15 years, as these are spaces that are located on one of the 21 sites that have the new spaces funding. We have to create new spaces. We can't get rid of old spaces or accommodate them within the new childcare. They have to be brand new spaces. And then there's a further 656 spaces within the school district. These are spaces that do not currently have ministry funding. They're just spaces that have always been on the district sites in one way or another, like South Park has 30 before and after school spaces in their annex is a good example. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides are just photos, essentially. So this slide is a photo of campus view. It's the exterior of campus view. And to give you an idea, there's two childcare units on site. One unit is to accommodate full-time 3 to 5-year-old program, and the other unit accommodates a preschool program and before and after school program. What you don't see on this slide is that Campus View at a School Care actually has another portable on site that does a registered before and after school program, and they share another portable, fourth portable, with the music program for further before and after school sites. And we actually, with part of the ministry funding, we put a curtain in the gym to accommodate kids in the gym, and they still have a wait list of about 60 kids, to give you an idea of just the enormity of how much before and after school care is needed in our schools. Next slide, please. This is just quick pictures of an interior of one of our finished units. You can see the kitchen there with fridge and dishwasher, laundry machine, open play space. There's the bathrooms in the very back. There's 3 bathrooms to accommodate 30 kids, and then a cubby space and some shelving. So it's pretty typical studio. Next slide, please. This is just the same studio, but it's actually decorated. So give you an idea, if you go to the 10 sites that have actually been completed, they all look different inside. It's actually quite unique to see how everybody has decorated their different sites for the little people in the different ages. So next slide, please. And one part of us, most of our sites actually we're building childcare studios. Eagleview and View Royal are a little bit different in that the sites made more sense to actually do additions. So Eagleview is seeing an addition, I think, on the southwest side of the school, and View Royal is seeing an addition on their childcare annex, which is, I think, it's on about the southeast side of. Not very good with that part, but somewhere on the school site there's additions. Anyways, those gives you an idea. And both of these sites, those were taken last week, and the additions will be ready for occupancy in this September, coming September 1st. Next slide, please. So the childcare process, there's a little bit to the process. So once we receive the funding, we actually have to follow quite the process. So first and foremost, we actually consult with the staff and PAC on the location of the childcare units. Once we've consulted with the staff and PAC, we then reach further into the surrounding community to consult with the community on the placement of the childcare units. There are some things that determine the placement, such as lot lines and the electrical lines and the plumbing. But for the most part so far, we've come to sites on all of the 11, so we're good there. Once we determine the site, we actually get the drawings completed, and these are submitted to municipality. It takes anywhere from 6 to 8 months to hear back from the municipality for the approved building permit. To give you an idea, most recent building permit took 14 months, and some of them take as little as 4 months. So on average, it's about 6 to 8 months before we receive the building permit. Once we receive the building permit, then we work with our purchasing department to actually contract out the site prep, and then we schedule in our builds. So all of our builds are actually built in-house by our QP382 trades employees, and the units can be built on-site or off-site. About 2 years ago, we built the Tommy Trades building, which is the picture in that photo there, and that's to accommodate our off-site builds. So the school district has been very fortunate to have a group of dedicated employees. And due to the childcare funding, we're actually really lucky because we've been able to expand our capital program to accommodate these builds, which also helps the school district in a number of ways. I'll give you kind of 2 examples. So when we have an emergency, we're actually able to pull our trades. We have more trades to pull on to get that emergency dealt with. And another way, we actually have 2 red sealed roofers on our capital department to help our 1 maintenance worker that takes care of over 2 million square feet of roofing. So that's really integral to helping keep our roofs in really good shape. We've also expanded the capital department to allow for apprenticeship program. So that started in 2019, and we've graduated 1 electrician and 1 carpenter to date, and we still have a number of apprentices in different various years and different disciplines. This has also allowed us to actually work with our students as well. We're really fortunate to work with our students who are interested in the trades, and we're able to give them hands-on opportunities and various experiences on different sites and within different disciplines. So it's good. Next slide, please. I guess over the years, I've actually had the fortune to get to know many of the childcare providers throughout the school district. And with the Ministry of Education and childcare funding, the teams worked with the providers to apply and expand childcare on each of the different sites. So due to these childcare expansions, a childcare manual was created that expands on the licensing requirements, but also the responsibilities of the providers and the school districts in times of emergencies, but also to ensure the expansions are a success. Our secondary schools are opposed to have birth to age 5-year-old childcare, and many of our sites can accommodate the practicum hours for students who want to further their education in the childcare sector. The vision is essentially to have birth to school-age childcare on all elementary school sites that accommodate this vision. And it's essentially to allow a seamless transition for students and families. Next slide is for Charmaine to wrap up now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marnie. Yeah, that's just, it's a lot. There's remarkable changes taking place in the early years, and also life is more complicated than ever for many of our littlest learners. So I think when we are moving forward and we're doing our work and our planning, we need to be mindful of where it all begins, right? And when I was a kindergarten teacher, I always asked myself, how can I best nurture that beginning? And so I encourage you to ask that question. How can we best nurture that beginning? And thank you so much for this opportunity this evening. And if there are any questions, we welcome that. Stop the share.
I saw Trustee Duncan's hand first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. Clearly, you've all been extremely busy rolling all of this out, and there's obviously a absolutely massive growth in both our infrastructure and the programs that we can offer. I did have a few questions. First, I wondered whether or not, in relation to the mental health and happiness data that was quoted on page 19 of the packet, whether we could get a link to the actual study itself. I would like to delve in a little bit in more detail to see more fully the nature of the challenges and dissatisfaction noted by children and youth. Because I think, that it is important for us to understand sort of more in a more deep way what it is that children and youth are struggling with, and appreciate that it's national data. And I wondered too, in terms of the timing of this, I'm thinking about the timing of the annual How We Are Doing report. And I'm wondering whether either you or possibly the superintendent could speak to when we will be considering that reporting and how that feeds into your planning. And I've got a couple other smaller questions, but I wonder if someone, I don't know if you want me to keep asking questions or if it's easier for you to answer that one before I move on.
Okay, I was keeping track of your questions. Yes, as I will follow up with you on the UNICEF data. I too got myself into a rabbit hole of, so I'd love to share that with you. And through the chair, Deb, did you want to respond to the How We Are Doing report? Not sure.
Yeah, we do have on the timeline for Ed policy presentations. Director of Indigenous Ed is presenting in May. I recognize that the pod report is coming out sooner than that, but that is sort of the time that we have set. And we may be able to look at just seeing if there's another opportunity to bring that information forward prior to the May presentation, but it is set for May 1st, I think it is.
That's good to know. I guess my only other question, really prioritize this one, is just around the data. So I've raised this before, I was struck by we're talking about data and the importance of data to planning and then monitoring the implementation of our plans. And I've continued to be struck by all of the data masking in the FESL document that we submitted to the ministry, in particular the masking around how particular students are doing, and this is again aggregate data. And there's masking in areas of, literacy and numeracy for Indigenous students, for diverse learners and students with disabilities. And so I guess I wanted to raise it again tonight because I think we need to sort of challenge the idea that that data should be masked, and really be clear that if it is masked, there is a true risk of re-identification. And in cases where there is a true risk of individual students being identified by the aggregate data, that we look to provide the board at least with an unredacted version of that aggregate data, because it is really difficult for a board to do our work without full access to data on how our students are doing. So I wanted to raise that again tonight because, you know, we're speaking to data, we're speaking to our FESL commitments, and having unredacted access to that data is just so important. But yeah, so thank you so much again for all the work that you're doing. I'm looking forward to us also having the benefit of the reporting that you're going to be putting together for the ministry in your new capacity, in your new role. I think that will be really helpful for the board as well when it comes to planning in this area. So thanks again for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan. Next, Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. No, a wonderful presentation, and wow, ton of stuff. So I'll try to just hit the high points. First one was that within the presentation, there were a number of district reports or guidance information. I was wondering if it'd be possible to at least find out whether that information, if it's already posted on the website, then maybe just a link, or just for example, there were ones about early learning and childcare facilities, and I know that some of those I've seen in the past, but trying to figure out when and where would be a challenge. If it's possible to get the links to the documents, I'd really appreciate it. And certainly no rush. We got lots of time for that one.
Thank you.
One of the things I noted was that early learning was accessible, or inclusive, sorry, inclusive was the term. And for me, that immediately brought up issues of accessibility. And I was wondering, the childcare spaces that we're creating, are we keeping a mind towards making sure that we have, you know, accessible washrooms and ramps as well as stairs, things along those lines? I'm seeing a nodding head.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So all of our childcare are accessible. So they've got an accessible washroom, open play space. They've got, if they don't have ramps, they've got a lift that is accessible. It makes them accessible. And all our childcare providers have an accessibility program within their program. That makes sense.
That's perfect, because that was the next part of my question. So thank you very much for that one. One of the things I was wondering about, because as was mentioned, the two ingredients are space and staff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great to see that we have early childhood education learning opportunities for students. Mm-hmm. One of the things I was wondering about is one of the key elements of going from an ECA to an ECE is actually having time in these facilities. Is that something that's being considered?
I can't speak from the district, but from a lot of our childcare providers, they're actually providing their staff with this actual education that's paid for. Every provider is a little bit different in what they offer, but I would say a lot of them are trying to expand on their staff's education. So they have more ECEs. If they want to expand to infant toddler, they get that requirement, that education in-house, and then they look at expanding after that.
Okay, and thank you for that. That's a great point. I was wondering specifically about the students who are accessing this, the dual credit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that question. Can I go ahead and
please?
Okay, so the dual credit program, yeah, it starts them off on their pathway. You have to be an adult to become an early childhood educator, and it sets them up for that pathway. And fortunately, we're including childcare on our secondary sites. So the goal is to be able to have those practicum experience within the school that you're attending your dual credit. In the meantime, we have our partnership with Camosun, and so students are placed in community care or school on-site care to experience the childcare in that setting.
Well, thank you very much for that. And then the last one, and I appreciate this is a bit of a left fielder, so I'm not expecting an answer right now, but my attention twigged when there was mention of how Strong Start coordinators, leaders are able to actually provide some assistance to families to access external resources, et cetera. And we did have an example with one of our elementary schools where there was an on-site resource person who was able to address that, not for Strong Start in particular, to my understanding, but for the broader community. And I was wondering what might some of the implications be if we looked at like Strong Start, I understand is only limited hours during the morning. I'm wondering, would there be any, or what the staff assessment would be of potentially increasing some of those hours or increasing family access to those Strong Start coordinators? Because to my understanding, in the one school where we had the program, it was incredibly successful and made a big difference for kids beyond the early years, moving into elementary school, and who still needed access to external supports or just guidance. So I guess that was very rambling. It's kind of like a question, but I'll leave you to parse out what you like.
Thank you. I would like to sit with that and think more about that. But yeah, I think navigators, family navigators are really important. I know they're available in community, and I think Strong Start can often set up families with a community navigator to help with the outreach. But I would agree with you. I think the more access and conduit to these services, the better. So definitely would appreciate speaking to you more about your thoughts. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. Next, Trustee Kwan.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to pause here for a minute because I see Superintendent Witten's hand up, and I just want to make sure that Deb, if you're responding to someone in particular, I can give you a chance to quickly jump in here if you need it.
Oh, thank you very much. I was really looking at just clarifying the resources. The memo that is provided in the pack-up has the resources with regards to the supporting documents, the BC Early Learning Framework, the UNICEF report, and the EDI for Greater Victoria, as well as the teacher partner information, childcare manual, ECE, teacher information, and the welcoming. So I just wanted to clarify if there was another document that trustees were looking for.
I think the Early Learning Framework.
Okay.
Is that what I understood? Yeah. That's what I wrote down, but you can
There's
clarify.
A link. There is a link on your
memo. Okay, great.
Yeah, there is a link there.
I wasn't sure if I'd included that, so thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Sure, if I could just clarify, I'll certainly follow up with that. I think I prompted that question, but along with Trustee Duncan, sorry, I want to say Trustee Nicole for some reason. No, and maybe I was just doing it the wrong way, but I was trying to click on what I thought were the links in the document, and it just wasn't working for me. So I'll give it another shot.
Thank you.
Okay, now passing it over to Trustee Kwan.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so my questions are actually more along the lines of, more about cost and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to have some clarification on, some of the resources we're using and where the costs are coming up from. First of all, I did see later on in Secretary Treasurer's report or the budget and year to date that it looks like our acting district principal, Short, is being funded from the early learning and childcare capacity funding. So that answers one of my questions. But I actually saw a lot of, especially in facilities, the carpenters and the roofers and that kind of thing that are building these units, and knowing that they're part of the school district facilities already, are they being paid from school district operating funds, or are they being paid separately from childcare operating or, you know, some kind of grant there?
No, it's a great question. All of our capital facilities department are paid through capital grants. So if we don't have the money, they get laid off. So in these cases, the ones that are listed, they're specifically for the childcare, and they're paid for the childcare to work on the childcare. Though when there's emergencies, I'll be honest, we pull them off, and there's a lot of great skilled people that we kind of move them around to different projects, but they're moved around to capital projects. They very rarely will work on a maintenance project. So.
And that includes the foreman as well?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And then my second question again was the units. First of all, is that also a capital grant that's separate from school district that is a childcare grant for building those units? And just if you could give me a kind of an estimated cost of what it costs to build one of those units.
So we have to apply every single site. So we've done 21 separate applications. For every single site has a separate application. When we first started, to give you an idea, the funding was coming in around 700,000. Our last one that we applied for was 1.7 million. So it's kind of, if you think of it as one big pot of money, and we just continue to move along, and we're with material prices increases and everything, we're doing really well with the budget. Yeah.
and that's a separate grant than, you know, other capital grants that we're getting for school district projects?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, I'd like us to move along to new business, D1, and I will pass it over to Trustee, oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. Superintendent Whitten, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say Trustee McNally had her hands up.
Oh, sorry, Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I have two questions. One is, it seems like trivia, but I'd really like to know how the space was found at Uplands. I think for 2 childcare sites. My memory tells me that Uplands was used for international students. And so what has changed in terms of the space there that allows us to give 2 rooms to early childhood education? I mean, which is awesome, but how did that happen?
Okay, Marnie, do you want to answer that, or do you...
Yeah, sure. We actually talked with the childcare providers, and it was deemed that in that area there was 3 to 5 year old care needed. So we applied for the 3 to 5 year old care, and it was accepted. The funding was approved, and now we're working with the community on the actual location of the childcare units where we thought we should place them. The community has given us some other feedback, so we're actually looking on the plumbing runs to determine if we can move them a little bit further into the property line. So it was just a matter of the need is there for our community.
Oh, thank you. I was assuming it was going to be, you know, the surface was going to be located within the Uplands building, but no.
No, there are 2 units, 2 childcare units outside. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. And we're all aware of BC Ed Access's tracking of exclusions from field trips and so on. Probably, well, what can I say? Undoubtedly, because of the lack of EA trained support to support children with serious behavioral challenges, kids who need a lot of support. So is that kind of attendance issue going to be tracked at these childcare sites? If children are sent home because of behavior that can't be managed by the staff, for example?
That is a great question. I know that within the agreements signed between the district and the childcare providers, that inclusive language is included in the agreement. And I would imagine as we unroll this out, these same policies that we have in place for school care and learning would then translate into early care. And I know that children who apply or children who join the childcare are offered support in the early care. Is that your answering your question, Trustee McNally?
Well, I guess I'll have to think about it more. I mean, I believe that some, you know, in order to ask a better question, but I believe that some of our students in the district who do have challenging behaviors are asked, their parents are asked to agree to partial day attendance and other variations of a standard school day. So I'm wondering if that's part of the agreement envisioned for the early childhood services. I know I'm kind of focusing on a tough part of it, and that's not to negate the wonderfulness of the whole enterprise.
Well, I think it's, sorry, through the chair, I think it's a really important point and conversation. And I think we always need to think about the child, that particular child and that particular family, and work with the family and the staff to, on a child per child. I think no child is the same. So I don't know if it would be, I would be worried to start adding in strict policy when we really want to get to know the child's specific concern and respond to that. But I really recognize, yeah, what you're trying to say. I think that would be something we may recognize as we unfold this, and so to be mindful of that will be important. And I do hope that our care providers are thinking about the impact of the child as they navigate that.
Just to add a little bit more, a lot of our,
I guess it's one of those more will be revealed as we go along. So thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Sorry. We have time for one more question. Tracy Humphreys.
Thank you. It's really a response to Trustee McNally's question, sort of BCED Access hat on, because we have had lots of conversations, and I've spoken at length with Minister of State Katrina Chen about this, and I'm pretty familiar with it from a provincial perspective. And there is a role, I think, for trustees to look at policy in this, but a lot of it does come down to the training and what the childcare providers know how to do. And so I do think that does, as you said, Trustee McNally, does come into those agreements. And I think it is important to visit those agreements and look at having language in there that covers this. And I'll also just quickly say that BCED Access is looking at probably next school year, starting to track exclusions in those centers as well that are connected with school districts. So there will be data.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to move us on to the next item on the agenda, new business, and I'll pass it over to Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wonder if before we move on, we could just get a little bit of clarification. I think it's important for us to just clarify the extent to which school districts in this new space of early childhood education are in fact overseeing the conditions that the children are in. So I think that's the other thing we have to just sort of like clarify for ourselves, so that we understand that although we're providing space as a school district, we're not overseeing the operations. And so that's something I think we have to be clear on, and that we're going to need to kind of keep our eyes on, because that it creates some complexity. So I don't know if there's any other clarification besides just acknowledging that we're providing space and that we're not overseeing operations. and unless I've got that wrong.
I can add something to that through the chair. Well, we do have the childcare policy in place, and there's program language written into the policy. It's about program quality. And so that involves biannual check-ins and connections with our childcare. And I think as we merge childcare into our education system, we then also are able to extend our professional learning and training to the care providers, which we've already started to do. So that common language of what we're sharing with teachers in schools is also then shared from the 0 to 5 sector. So in many ways, it's adding a layer of quality care to the existing facilities. Yeah, so personally, I think of it as an enriched access point to the childcare. And also, I think just thinking back to your other question, in that childcare policy, which is included in the childcare manual, so always welcome to take a deeper look. We have the inclusive language written in there, and we work with QA to find those supports for the children who are going to be attending the childcare, just as we would when they start school. Again, it's new. We're unfolding this and learning as we go. And thank you for your questions. I've written lots of notes to also find out more for myself with some of your good questions.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that. And thanks so much for that point of, or just expanding on the clarification. So the next item and the pack up, it's just an information item more than anything at this point for the board. It won't be the first time that we'll be considering this, but it is the first opportunity for most trustees to have a look at the letter that was received on the 24th of November through the CEO of the BC School Trustees Association, and then later published on the BC Human Rights Commissioner's website. So it's at page 40 of the pack-up. It's a letter from the BC Human Rights Commissioner regarding school liaison officer programs. I just wanted to highlight a few things for trustees in particular at this point. So the BC Human Rights Commissioner is writing to school districts in her capacity, including sort of municipal government bodies that she oversees, and school districts are obviously covered by that. The actual capacity she lists in her letter is section 47.12, subsection 1C of the Human Rights Code, which provides that the commissioner is responsible for promoting and protecting human rights, including by making recommendations or using other means the commissioner considers appropriate to prevent or eliminate discriminatory practices, policies, and programs. And so in her letter, in addition to highlighting the authority that she's writing to school districts under, she also points out that she has also written separately to the Minister of Education and the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, urging them to commission research without delay into the impacts of SPLO programs, in particular on people of color and youth and children of color. And she sums up by requesting that I'll just quote her. Out of respect for the rights of our students, I strongly recommend that all school districts end the use of SPLOs until the impact of these programs can be established empirically. And then she goes on to say, for school boards who choose not to take this step, it is incumbent on you to produce the independent evidence of the need for SPLOs that cannot be met through civilian alternatives, and to explain the actions you are taking to address the concerns raised by Indigenous, Black, and other marginalized communities. So we also included in the packet for your information a research document entitled "The State of School Liaison Programs in Canada" that was provided along with another document, which let me just go and get the name of that. Another document called "Equity is Safer: Human Rights Considerations for Policing Reform in British Columbia." That document was also provided by the Human Rights Commissioner for school districts to consider. And that document is something that the Commissioner's office compiled as part of a submission to a special committee of the legislature looking into reforms of the Police Act. So just again, for your information, in January, the SPLO ad hoc committee intends to meet again to complete its work. And so sometime early spring, it's very likely that our board will be considering both the recommendations coming from the ad hoc committee about the program, in addition to the Human Rights Commissioner's letter and the attached research and reports. So this is really just your opportunity to get on top of some of that information earlier rather than later, and then expect to see something in the pack up likely early February, given that the committee is meeting in January. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point.
Trustee Kwan.
Thank you, Chair. Just probably more comments than questions. But I think the big question for me here is consistency and really who determines an SLO's role in the schools. Just from experience, just from what I've seen, even just in the last month or so, it varies a lot, even just from school to school. So that was a big takeaway for me. And then just some points I wanted to make from some of the reading I did with the pack up was interesting quote from Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, that literature on SLOs is descriptive and takes a colorblind approach, which was really stood out to me. So that was something that I took to heart, as well as in the report when disability was being referred to as having a learning, emotional, or behavioral disorder, and about SLOs and their beliefs about students with those disabilities and the data collected. Yes, it was done in America, but I would assume that it wouldn't be all that perhaps different where we are as well, depending on where they're located. But just some really great reading there, and I do encourage everyone, if you haven't read through it yet, it's pretty good stuff.
And Trustee Carmichael.
Thank you. I made it back, but I was reading today in preparation for this meeting that the Vancouver School Board recently voted 5-4 to continue with their police liaison program, with their chair stating that police officers don't belong in schools, but neither do drugs, violence, or gangs. And so that was a really interesting quote, I thought, and something to think about when going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee McNally.
Yeah, it's a fraught consideration. I think for me, the key takeaway in the information provided to us is an empirical analysis of what the SLOs provide that cannot be provided by civilian means. You know, there's lots of there's lots of thoughts about getting children used to state control, and it's a very fraught question. I mean, I'll just say personally in my life, I've had exceptional help in very, very frightening circumstances from police. So I'm not, defunding the cops fan or anything like that, but what are the services provided that can't be provided by civilians? I think that's what we really have to look at. And yeah, Vancouver was interesting in terms of, what we can control and what we can't. I would like to think we can control by, providing social help, that we could control gang membership and drugs and violence, but it's pretty obvious that we can't. But we can control police presence in our schools, benign or, well, it's benign, I think. Anyway, it'll be an interesting question going forward with the committee tasked with making a decision to bring a recommendation to the board.
I'll pass it back to Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up by just clarifying that, I guess, first of all, that very recently the Vancouver School Board actually voted, or I should say the previous Vancouver School Board voted to discontinue their SPLO program. And then it was quite well covered in the press that the new Vancouver School Board made a commitment during the election process to reinstate it. But I would, encourage trustees to have a look at the previous Vancouver School Board did engage some consultants to take a more independent look at some of the impacts of the program. And they, in some of the documents that were provided by the Human Rights Commissioner, you'll note that the researcher did focus in on some of that work that was conducted by the consultants in Vancouver, looking at the Vancouver School Board SPLO program. And it's one of the few documents that's available in the Canadian context that does consider the impacts on students, both students of color, but also students with disabilities. So I encourage you to have a look at that because it's certainly something that the committee has looked at. And then finally, I would just clarify that the ad hoc committee's role is to make recommendations to the board. And it'll be the board ultimately that decides, in considering those recommendations. And obviously now the letter and supporting documents from the Human Rights Commissioner, how we want to proceed, whether in terms of the program in the future. So yeah, that was it, unless there's any other questions. Thanks for your time.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to pass it over to Chair Painter for the Operations Committee.
Thank you very much, Chair Mabobi. And I would just wonder if I could get a quick show of hands if people feel like this would be a good time for a 5-minute break, or should we just press on? Those in favor of a 5-minute break, I'm seeing hands. Okay, I'm going to say 5 minutes. It's 8:29 now, according to mine. We'll reconvene at 8:34, so everyone can get a stretch and a drink, and I'll see you then. Okay, it looks like we're just about all back. And I recognize Trustee Duncan before we get started.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight in the chat, I shared a link to the Vancouver School Board SPLO report that I mentioned, and also another link to the second document shared by the BC Human Rights Commissioner, which was their submission to the Special Legislative Committee reviewing potential reforms to the Police Act. So just if you want to copy those links.
Thanks very much, Trustee Duncan. Okay, our first order of business is approval of the November 21st, 2022 Operations Policy and Planning Committee meeting minutes. Trustee McNally.
Thank you. Before we move to approve those minutes, I'd like to note that my motion to halt further work on Cedar Hill before we got a full costing and realistic plan for a seismic remediation of the existing building was left off. And I know the motion became moot because the previous motion to go ahead with approving the architect's plans, looks like the plan will go ahead and action will continue. But I think it's important for the record to note that my motion was made and it should be recorded and I guess designated as moot as the motion. I can't remember the actual letter and number of the motion, which carried, but it's moot because that carried unanimously. So Chair, I'm wondering if we could have that, my motion added as just being moot.
Yeah, and
I think it was under new business.
you bet, Trustee McNally. And I see a couple of hands. Trustee Kwan, you were first up, so I will refer to you.
Yeah, sorry. I think correct me if my memory is wrong, but I know that we discussed that motion actually in the board meeting, which was the November 28th meeting. And so I think that's where the motion was. I don't think it was on the ops. As far as I recall, I don't believe us discussing that at all at the ops. I believe it was only at the board meeting, and I see Trustee Duncan nodding her head. So I think it will be on the minutes from like next week for the board meeting. And we did actually discuss it. We did move it up on before the other motion, and we did have a discussion on that motion, Trustee McNally.
Thank you. Is that your recollection, Chair Pinter?
That is actually, I know that we did discuss it. I just
Okay.
at a certain point in the year, all the meetings start to merge into one. So I wasn't recalling which meeting we'd actually discussed it. So sorry, I wasn't able to clarify that right off the bat.
That's the situation for me too. Well, when we come to the board meeting, I'll I'll hope that it's recorded in the minutes of ops for approval. It won't be for approval, it'll be for information only. So I hope it'll appear there. Otherwise, that'll be problematic.
Yep. And Trustee Duncan, did you have anything further on that one?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the benefit of Trustee McNally that the minute will indeed reflect that your motion was moved up in the agenda. It was moved, seconded, and then voted. Like this discussion was engaged in, and then the board voted. So you'll see that reflected in the minute. And then, Chair, I have an amendment to the minutes.
Thank you for that clarification, Trustee Duncan.
I see no other hands, so please proceed with your amendment.
Thanks, Chair. So it's at page 85 of the pack-up at E4 of the minute. I just wanted to add a little bit of clarifying language. So after, so the second to last, it's a sentence. So at E4, the item is Cedar Hill Middle School's design approval. before the vote, there's a sentence that says trustees and partner groups had questions of clarification. After that, I wanted to add the following, which I will put in the chat so that's easier because it's got a little bit wordy. But it's that trustees and staff discussed possible solutions. Let me just send it to you, first of all. So trustees and staff discussed possible solutions to address the cost of adding shop ventilation. Staff confirmed that existing Cedar Hill shop equipment can be stored for use in the new Cedar Hill Middle School. So I'd just like to add that, and I'm at the discretion of the committee. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other amendments or adjustments to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amended minutes, please designate. Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much for that, Trustee Duncan. And business arising from the minutes. Hands, anyone? Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, pardon me. I just need to get up to that part of the agenda here again. Sorry, folks. Just one item. I just wanted to acknowledge that Marnie had very kindly added or really addressed the question about whether our district needs additional electric buses at the moment. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that that she had undertaken that work to address that business arising from the last agenda, and that it's in the pack-up at page 96. And thanks again to Marnie.
Great point. And actually, I was very appreciative to see that my questions about Cedar Hill ventilation and security were also in the agenda package as well. So that was much appreciated. Okay, moving along, presentations to the committee. Educational assistance. We're going to hear from VC-PAC President Tracy Humphreys.
Thank you. I'm going to be looking at my notes, so I apologize in advance if anybody is trying to get my attention. You might want to use words because I don't have this memorized. But I want to acknowledge first that it's really hard for me to separate my two hats here. As Executive Director of the BC Ed Access Society, this is a really hot topic for us as well. So please forgive me for kind of going back and forth on that. But the important thing I'm here to say is that all children have the right to equitable access to education through international conventions and national and provincial human rights laws and the BC School Act. And this is realized for children and youth with disabilities at the school level largely through the support of education assistance. And in addition to supporting academics, EAs might support communication, behavior, medical needs, personal care. They also support students to be fully included members of their classroom and school community. Now, BC Ed Access is now in its 5th year of tracking the exclusions of disabled students from schools. Across the province, 4,760 incidents of exclusion were reported last year. 12% of those reports were from this school district. In this district, like in many others, we've received reports of students left out of school entirely from days to months at a time, kept from learning and social opportunities while at school, and students restrained and secluded. Our demographic data shows that students with multiple systemically oppressed identities are excluded in higher percentages than their representation in BC's population. VC-PAC has been hearing from members for years about the lack of adequate support available and talking about it at this table. And this year, I've been hearing about unfilled positions and safety concerns all over the district from families, from staff, and members of the community. We're facing a crisis and it needs to be thoughtfully addressed. So I want you to imagine yourself as a new graduate from the district bridging program, just as an example here. So you show up at the school at the bell as scheduled. No time to read IEPs or plans because you're minute to minute going into classrooms where teachers don't know your skill level. They don't know how to utilize an EA effectively, possibly. You're supporting not one, but multiple students, and you don't know if you're doing the job right because no one coaches you. And tomorrow you're going to get called to do it all again at another day at another school. Now imagine you're a student. Let's say you're in grade 11. You need support to organize your work, to break down assignments into smaller pieces, to transition comfortably from one space to another and regulate in different spaces that have different numbers of students, noise, light, smells, but you don't really even know whether you have an EA. There's a lady who sometimes helps you a bit in social studies, mostly by doing your assignment for you, but at least it gets handed in. You have no one to help you in math, no one to help you transition. You get frustrated most days. Some days you just don't bother going to school and you're more and more disconnected from the school community every day. I could talk about what it's like for a teacher too, or for a principal who often has to act as an EA because of shortages. And as I thought about what to say here, I thought about violent incident reports, learning the low arousal technique, prevention, teacher and principal training, policies and regulations with opportunities to improve things. I considered data. District Foundation Skills Assessment data shows that disabled students in grade 7 are below 60% in literacy and just above 40% in numeracy. We also know that significant numbers of disabled students are excluded from this assessment entirely every year. Importantly, only just above 60% of disabled students report feeling welcome at school. So Charmaine earlier, I noticed, talked about moving upstream when data shows the challenges, and we think this is an important point that needs focus throughout the school years. So you see the data here, and we need to look upstream to fix it. And so I also took direction from the EAs I've spoken with. I didn't get a chance to talk to QP, sorry, it's just been hectic. I wanted to talk before coming and talking about this. So I just want to list some suggestions and then I'll be done here. So I'd like this board to support the ask to the province for EA standards of practice. I'd like them to create a district EA supervisor as a suggestion to support and provide mentorship, design Pro-D, coach principals and classroom and learning support teachers on how to better utilize EAs, provide prep time and more 30-hour or even 35-hour-a-week positions. And we need to discuss the issue of inclusion in the district as connected to the strategic plan and with consideration for information collected through the VCPAC comprehensive survey that was done. And there are always really great things happening in districts, and I'm always the one coming with, difficult statistics and hard stories. And I just wanted to say I do recognize the hard work that staff does do to include students, and there are always great stories, but equity is when those great stories and great experiences are available to all students. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I always appreciate your insight and your input. We'll move on to Carrie Peter, who'll be talking to us about Vic High reopening. Oh, sorry, wait, I'll pause there. Before we go on, I see a hand up from Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wondered if Tracy would mind if there is anything written up that she could share with us, in particular in relation to your ask. I made a note, but I don't want to miss anything. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. I meant to mention that, yeah, I just didn't have time to get a presentation together in the time frame that I had to submit it. So, but I'm more than happy to send something along afterwards, and I'll send you the exclusion tracker report as well, which has lots of data. Thank you.
Yeah. As a suggestion, it might be worth, if you have the time, to write us a letter we can include in correspondence with the links, and that might be a way for us to, ensure that information isn't lost.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, now, see no other hands. Oh, sorry, Trustee Duncan, did you have Trustee McNally, I apologize. No, okay. I just saw a movement in the corner of my eye. So, Carrie Peter, without further ado, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Painter. Good evening, everybody. For those that aren't aware, I'm the current PAC Chair of Central Middle School, and I have been asked by the PAC Chair of Vic High, Kate Wallace, to speak on behalf of feedback of families that were asked to provide their input to the current Vic High project. And just to surmise it, unfortunately, most families are upset at the delay of the Vic High return to the Fernwood campus. there was a survey that was sent out and feedback from families at Vic High that were able to get access to the survey because there was issues getting the communication out to the families as well. Basically surmised that the Topaz site is overcrowded and there is definitely impacts to the mental and physical health of students on site there. With the next cohort coming into the Topaz site, if the Vic High campus is to be opened up in January, there's going to be that many more students on site, which then increases the potential anxiety levels or mental health issues of students and staff on site as well. So with that in mind, with the physical health of students there, their understanding is the arrangements with the city to use Topaz Park as well for physical outlets out there. Unfortunately, the turf fields are under construction there, so the Topaz Park in and of itself, with the current situation with the unhoused that are frequenting and living in the park, provides a, dare I say, an unsavory environment for our students and children to be attending. So it just ratchets up the urgency to return our students to the Fernwood site as well. Just getting back to the communications with the project to the families, unfortunately, many families are upset that they only hear about the updates basically by the radio. And this is very concerning to families, and there has been requests to have more timely updates with regards to the project be provided to families and catchment families for that matter, families that are coming in to the 2023 school year to be looped in as well. So basically there are requests that have been submitted through the form that was sent out to families, and there are, I believe there are 8 of them, and biggest one is to again have ongoing and frequent communications of the project direct to the families that are impacted by it. So Vic High catchment families, which is inclusive of Central Middle School as well. Certainly the need, I mean, as far as another request that whether or not a representative from either Vic High and or Central Middle School even be part of the committee that is putting the project together to help facilitate the communication out to families would be another recommendation. Oh. That's my timer to make sure I'm not going over 5 minutes. So I apologize for that. But definitely I'd like to reinforce the requests that families have made and provided in their letter that was sent to trustees the 22nd of November. But just keep wrapping it up. Although I'm from Central Middle School, Darren Alexander has graciously offered to speak, and he is from Vic High. So if there are any questions from anybody, I'm more than happy to answer them. But other than that, I'd be more than happy to pass it over to Darren Alexander to speak as a family member of Vic High. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your insight, and yeah, it's always helpful to get concrete recommendations out of these presentations. So we will take those under consideration. Thank you. Okay, moving along. Next, as Carrie Peter mentioned, we'll hear from Darren Alexander, and Darren, you have 5 minutes. And if you're speaking, I can't hear you yet, Darren. You might be muted on your machine, or. No, I still don't hear you. You're muted on or you're unmuted on the Zoom meeting, but I'm not picking up your audio, perhaps on your computer itself.
Hi, Darren. If you can hear me, there is, excuse me, there are audio settings next to the microphone icon. in Zoom on the bottom left, there's a little arrow that will take you to choosing a different microphone, if that helps.
Oh.
And feel free to use the chat as well if you'd like to message for assistance. We're not hearing anything at the moment.
Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I wonder if Mr. Alexander unplugs his headphones, whether or not his computer microphone might kick in. And if not, my suggestion would be that Mr. Alexander might want to call back in using a phone. We won't be able to see him, but we would at least be able to hear his presentation.
Both good. Thank you. So yes, Ron, we're still unable to hear from you. Mr. Alexander, have you, is it possible for you to turn off your headset and to shut them down completely and use the microphone if you have one on your computer? No, I'm still not hearing you. And then the other option is, would you like to call in? And do we have a specific number for Mr. Alexander to call to be able to contact the?
Sure, it should be in the Zoom meeting invite, and we can forward that on again if we have Mr. Alexander's details. Or if I've got it here, I could actually paste it into the chat. One moment.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Canty is pasting the phone number in if you'd like to. So Mr. Alexander, Mr. Canty's now posted the information in there.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes. Yay, success.
Yay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you got a minute and a half left. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Thanks everybody for your patience. I'm not sure what went wrong, but I'm glad to be connected now. So what I'm hoping, I wanted to discuss with you the situation at Vic High and this extended, the construction issue and the and as Carrie put it, it's become a mental health issue. It's a wellness issue. There's overcrowding. The students are frustrated. The staff are frustrated. The space is, just there's not enough space for them to accomplish so many of the things, whether it's an assembly or a common space or, just addressing the frustrations. Now, some things can't be avoided, and obviously this delay seems to have been one of them. I think it's fair to say that while we all hope now it's going to be January, that it might not be January. Also, there's that chance that it's going to be another year lost as far as the transfer of students and grades to the new Vic High established the new Vic High school. So what I'm proposing is that we find something for the students, namely a student lounge, a space that the students can have to give them a sense of place and a sense of just, first of all, it's giving them something instead of asking them to just put up with having something less, which I don't know. We've had a long run of that for these kids. So some space to call their own, a student lounge. The science and the research around this is remarkable. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the situation, but a student lounge, if you were to Google high school student lounge benefits, it will immediately take you to I mean what crops up is a neat little site actually that will tell you this: a student lounge. When we ask kids what schools could do to be more responsive to their mental health needs, common responses include more chill space or casual hangout areas. Historically, if these types of spaces were in schools at all, they tended to be mostly inaccessible to students based in classrooms. So it's a place where they can, and there's remarkable restorative wellness. Attendance rates go up, benefits from academic achievements and graduation rates. All of this has been noted in schools that provide these kinds of lounges for high school kids. I think all of you can appreciate, as I can, what it was like to be 13, 14, 15, and how time is for you when you are that age. We can brush off, another year, oh, well, it's too bad, but you're going to have this new school. It goes on. At that age, that extra 6 months, that extra year is torturous. And it's not just that they're not getting what they're, hoping to be getting, but they're being asked to always be doing with less, and they're overcrowded and they don't have a space. A lounge would give them a space where they could meet up with their friends, where they could study, where they could heat up something to eat. A lot of these kids, the walk to get something to eat, it's a bit of a problem. They have a short lunch. I'm sorry if I'm using up all my time. I'm sure by now I'm overrun, but that's my proposal. I know obviously it's a conundrum. It's catch-22 space. Well, where's the space for? Sometimes it's administrative space is taken to make a lounge. Maybe there's a broom closet that can be a lounge. We heard from Charmaine about these constructions that can go up for daycares. There are easy, knock-up places that can be, if there was a little corner on the lot that could accommodate it. A kettle, a comfy couch, some place where they can hang out and call their own. Then they would have something to show for it for this time, instead of just being asked to wait and hang on. So I'll leave it there then. Thank you.
Well, thanks once again for concrete recommendations. It's much appreciated, and we're glad that we did have the opportunity to connect tonight.
Thank you very much for hearing me, everybody. I appreciate it.
And I see a hand from Trustee Kwan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Mr. Alexander, for coming forward again. I think it's really helpful when, we see people thinking out of the box and, making some suggestions and seeing how we can make a bad situation a little bit better. So I really appreciate that. I would agree with him. I don't know exactly what we could explore, but I think it's definitely food for thought and something that we could put a little more thought into, and perhaps come up with an idea of something that maybe would work for everyone. I also just wanted to go back to Carrie Peter, and thank you so much for your presentation as well. And I know that you were talking a little bit more about communication and what we could do for families of Vic High, specifically both Vic High and Central parents. I know there's quite an extensive report that goes into our ops committee meetings quite at least for the last couple that we've seen in our pack up. And I know that it's a little bit harder to find, but I wonder if that might be sufficient, if we could find a way to actually just send that out to the Vic High community parents, if that might be sufficient to really keep up with communication and what we could do around that. I think that would have a lot of information in there that Vic High and Cedro parents would be appreciative of. So just a couple of suggestions there. I'm not really sure where to go with that. I wonder if colleagues have any other suggestions, but just thought I'd put those two out there.
Thank you very much, Trustee Kwan. And I see VC PAC Chair Humphreys. Please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm just going to be really quick. I just wanted to personally thank Carrie and Darren for coming and speaking, because I remember the first time that I spoke, and I think both of you have spoken before, but I remember the first time I spoke at a school board meeting, and it was very nerve-wracking. And I'm always so excited to see parents coming and participating and sharing important things that they're hearing from school communities and really great ideas. And this is what I think collaboration should be all about in the district. So thank you.
And Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to both of the presenters. And I think it's a subject that certainly the board and staff will have to consider in collaboration with you folks. I'm hearing that what we've seen is a significant increase in enrollment in the time that students have been at the SJ Willis site, and that because of the sort of unexpected nature of the delays, that increased enrollment is really causing extra stress and strain for students. So, thank you for sharing that. I'm hoping that we can explore some of the concerns around access to outdoor space. In particular, I'm hearing also that Tomey Park, although the city has kindly offered the space for students, that it's from a practical perspective, it's not always well, from what I'm hearing, it may not always be a safe or accessible environment for students to use in lieu of another green space. So thank you. And I'm hoping that we can find some practical solutions, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Sounds like we need to do something pretty quick. So we'll see what we can come up with, but thanks again for raising the concerns.
It's thank you to all, and I do agree that it would be helpful to get a report on just what the level of access to, well, I don't know if the term amenities is quite appropriate, but to outdoor physical space for phys ed, and as well as internal constraints, that we just need the real appreciation for how effectively this swing space is actually meeting the needs of our students. I think that's something that we need to be mindful for, especially as this program extends on. It's okay, seeing no other hands, I will move on to Superintendent's report, and hand off to Superintendent Whitten to recognize our student representative.
Thank you, Chair Painter. Yes, so it is fantastic that we have Kira Milne with us. We met earlier today at the board office. We had dinner with the student reps, and we had a very thorough conversation around climate action and climate initiatives that we have in the district. So Kira then left and hustled home and got onto this call. So many thanks to Kira for joining us. And as always, Kira, as we've talked about, just if you have, as a student rep, or ideas as you've come through the system in Victoria, ideas are welcome. So thanks for joining us, and grade 12 student from Oak Bay.
Yes, and Kira, by all means, we, especially for the ones who are as silver as me, it's been a while since we've been in classes. We really do benefit from the insight that you bring. So feel free to pick up your hand at any point. You have as much opportunity to speak at these meetings as the rest of us. Okay, we're going to move on to I2. We've move the custodial review, December 5, 2022 memo up. So Superintendent Whitten, once again.
Thank you again. So we have Mark Baggett, who is the manager of building and operations, going to be providing this evening an overview on the custodial review. Included in this that you'll see on the memo are current and ongoing district custodial operations, the COVID guidelines, the BC CDC information, as well as the communicable disease plan that we have, and a funding summary and potential options if there were an increase in funding. So I will pass it over to Mark, who will walk you through the presentation this evening.
Mark, would you like me to share the screen?
That would be awesome. I could share mine. I've got my slides up here if that's easier for people. I don't know if I'm allowed to share though.
You can if you wish, whatever's easiest for you, Mark.
Why don't I share mine, see if I can get this going.
Sure.
How does that look for everybody? Good. Awesome.
That's
Thank you
good.
so much.
Thank you.
So there's 11 slides here. I will not spend that time on it. So a lot of it's provided just for your information. The first 3 slides goes through the Ministry of Education COVID guidelines as spelled out in August 2022, just prior to the school year start. I've also put a little bit from the BC CDC COVID guidance, also same date of August 2022. I've also given a page reference on there if you folks want to refer to that one. And then the SD61 Communicable Disease Prevention Plan, again, August 2022. So all 3 of these are in alignment. And I just wanted to talk, briefly about the fact that we've had some concerns raised of late regarding desktop cleanliness. And we've come out of, a pandemic where daily desktop sanitation was the norm. And we were, throwing funded money at it. We were throwing overtime at situations when we had shortages. And we had the funds available to do so. So I want to just dispel a little myth. And so these guidelines do not require daily desktop sanitation. And just to kind of talk about how we are funded right now, our funding level in custodial operations is sufficient to meet these guidelines. That's kind of the base point of how we are in terms of with the regulations. My next few slides, I'm going to go through a bit of a funding summary, which talks about where we were pre-pandemic, so 4 years ago, how we were through the 2 years of the pandemic, and then where we are today. And so you can see that there was a significant boost in the first year of the pandemic, where we saw 25 federally and provincially funded positions in our custodial operations division, which dropped to 10 when the federal funds got pulled for the second year and the provincial funding stayed. And so we had to make some hard decisions on where that was going to be going. And now we're into, what I'll call post-pandemic. So the funding from, federal and provincial sources has gone, and we are left with what we have, which is 106 positions, which is 10 shy of the pre-pandemic, as a result of reduction during the last year's budget process. The budget process was a 50% reduction in elementary and middle school day custodians. This didn't change anything in the secondary schools in terms of funded hours. It essentially eliminated 19 positions, and we created 20 splits through all the middles and elementaries to accommodate the day positions starting at one school and finishing at the other. If you want to look at how this affected our ability to clean, you can see that during the pandemic, we did daily desktop sanitation in K through 8. And what we're looking at right now across the district is we're back to where we were pre-pandemic, which is, K to 12 gets 1 to 2 times a week. But we've had that reduction in the day custodians in elementaries and middles, which has reduced our K to 1 daily desktop cleans quite significantly, and it's had an effect on the other elementary grades. And that's really where we see the big difference. You can see it wasn't just funding that raised our pandemic daily desktop sanitation. We also removed the rugs from K to 3 desktop vacuuming. And so when you, sorry, not desktop, K to 3 rug vacuuming, when you remove the rugs, you gain minutes to put into the desktops. And that's what we saw through the pandemic, as those classroom rugs came out and we did a lot more stuff on the desktops. Just so we're clear, we are not, this is how our funding is. We are not funded for daily desktop sanitation, yet we are still funded to meet the minimum guidelines from BC CDC, MOE, and from the school district 61 guidelines. The reduction also impacted other facilities groups. We've had to get our grounds crew and a few of our trades folks out there early in the morning to put ice melt down, and not shoveled yet, but it's getting close. I feel it's coming. And we've also had our 4 persons had to head to site to triage issues where there is no day custodian on site to kind of see what is urgent and what is not. So we get a lot of those 911 calls that we have to send our 4 persons to site to deal with that. If you talk to a principal in the district, there has been an impact there as well. Where we used to get, issues from students and teachers going to straight to the custodian, they're now going to the office, and that needs to make it to the principal to do a triage, and then that needs to go through to facilities management, and then through the 4 person, and then we need to figure out what the severity is and determine how quickly we need to respond to different issues. So that adds a lot of minutes to the admin's day, but it also delays the service that we were able to provide in previous years. There's an impact on reputation. I'm sure I'm not one to go on social media and see what it looks like, but I'm sure it's out there. I've seen some things shown to me, and I'm sure it's a bit tough for people to read. And I know in speaking with the custodial staff throughout the district, they're definitely down at this time. It's hurt our hiring and retention especially, and so we're not able to kind of bring in the workforce that we need to backfill for folks that are retiring or burning out, and even honestly working extra hard on, they're trying to do what they did last year and they can't. There's half of them, so we need to be cognizant of that and make sure that we keep that messaging going. Last couple of slides for you folks. So there was talk, I was brought to this meeting to show what it would take to bring it back to the way it was. And so I wanted to show, this is a lot of data on this, and I don't expect everyone to kind of go through it like I do. But there's a revert cost. It's so I've given you 4 columns here, 5 columns. One is our current state, where we are today. The revert column is setting it back to pre-pandemic levels, i.e. putting those positions back into the day custodians, 1 per school, elementary and middle. I've got a bridge option where that positioning gets added back, but more at the the midday hour, so we can take care of some of the midday tasks in elementary schools and then carry that through into the evening. A third option that I've put is putting all that money straight into the night staff and putting those 10 positions back into the evening only, when there's no students in the school, where we can get into all spaces and cover off cleaning areas. And the last one is my Hail Mary, that's my double. So what's the difference between 10 custodians going back and 20 custodians back? And the reason I put this column here is because I wanted you to see the effective square foot per full-time employee difference that it makes. So you can see we're at around 3,100. If you put 10 staff back into the evening, we get to almost 28,000. And then you go even further and you make a significant change if you go and double that, and you can get it down to nearly 22,000 square feet per day. Sorry, yeah, per shift. that would be 10 of my houses, and maybe more. So the last note at the bottom, there is a neighboring school district that cleans desktops daily from K to 12. They have the smallest square footage per effective square footage per FTE at almost 22,000. I'm not asking for this to happen, but I just wanted to give folks an idea of what it takes to do desktops with what that would take, and that is a huge change in personnel. By the way, that is a huge change. I didn't put the number there. It's I don't think we're looking at that right now. The desktop, the way I've laid out the desktops for you kind of shows you how putting the dollars back into different places gets it done more on the desktops than it is today. And you can see the change to facilities impact and school impact as well. And you got this in your pack-up, so it is there for you. My last slide is regarding implementation. And this is really important for folks to understand. If you decide to say, hey, Mark, go ahead, get 10 more employees, it is not going to happen tomorrow. There's a recruitment piece that needs to carry on through that. We will need to reorganize the runs because putting 10 people into 50 schools is not an easy task. That needs to get, stitched into the whole district. And if anything is, contrary or needs some wiggle room in the contract, we need to work with the unions to make sure that gets done properly. So there's a lot of work that needs to get done. We work hand in hand with the QP 382 staff and their union reps to make sure that we're doing things for the best interest of all the members. And fundamentally, at the end of it, we want equitable treatment of every school in terms of the custodial hours, so that every student gets the same result. I mean, we're here for the students, and that's why it is the way it is. So any change that comes from any of the meetings that you folks have, just be prepared for an implementation timeline. We will work as quickly as we can to get problems solved, and we do that daily. So that's all I've got. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
If I could ask us we'll stop sharing right now, and maybe I'll be able to see everybody once again. The first hand I saw up, probably just because of the way I've got my slides arranged, is Trustee Kwan.
Of course, I'm going to have questions, right? Thanks so much for that presentation, Mark. I really appreciate you putting that together and having it in the pack-up so we had a chance to look at it before. It just had a couple questions. They're mostly clarifying questions. So, pardon me, I noticed that on that operations and the potential options with increased funding, you had a line where there's the facilities impact, and that's a dollar amount too. Yeah. How does that feed into like the annual cost?
Okay, good question. There's no actual, we don't incur any more cost.
Okay.
It is a financial representation of how we're impacting the maintenance crews essentially. Okay. So those dollars are it's based on the hours that grounds and trades persons need to do things that they normally wouldn't do if we had those positions in place. And so I think it worked out to be nearly $50,000. That's essentially I want to say 0.7 of an FTE of time that we're affecting other groups. So even though there was a savings of 10 FTE through the reduction, there's an impact on other groups to pick up some of those pieces. And it's a financial representation of that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. And then just to follow up with the next slide, then when we were talking about the 50% funding available by January 2023. So I'm assuming that 621 or, going up to 1.2 million, that would be a total amount per year. Like I'm assuming that's what would be in a full year budget, or would that be just January to June?
Okay, so the 50% piece that I put on that final slide was to say if this budget line were to come into play right now, and this is what I know we're December 5th. If it comes into play right now, we would only have access to 50% of that budget by the end of the school year, because we're 6 months through the school year. And so it's essentially $310,000. And what I would do with that is I would hire people and get them like boots on the ground as fast as I could, but it would be a bit of a hodgepodge. I don't know exactly how it would look, and it wouldn't be as, you know, prescriptive as it was when I have the time to go through and rebuild the runs fully. Thanks.
Completely understood, and I do realize this puts some pressure on you for sure. I really do appreciate all of what you've brought forward. So I just want to clarify that we would be looking at, you know, about $310,000 cost for, let's say, the remainder of the year, and that would be something we actually didn't budget for. And then if we were to look at reverting back for next year, we would have the total cost, but that would be something that we could definitely put in the budget if we were going to do that. And that would be something we would look at in the spring. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciated it.
No problem.
And Trustee Duncan, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Baggett. Thanks for being here, and thank you very much for putting in a timeline and providing the context in terms of how you would deliver that. And so that's always very helpful for us to have in mind. I just wanted to clarify, I also appreciated some of the comparisons that you make with other school districts, where it looks like their runs are significantly smaller than ours. And I'm wondering, so we can see that change from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic is really mostly around desktops and having the capacity to clean desktops at the same rate as we did pre-pandemic. I'm wondering, you know, if you have a recommendation, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but you know, this really, I mean, I'm not an expert in custodial services, and it's an art and a science, I know, to providing those services. They are extremely important. And I know in other school districts, you know, they have long ago moved away from having full-time custodial services in elementary. But, you know, you can certainly see the value of having, you know, those custodians there, because, you know, the services they provide to the whole school community during the day. And you know, it's particularly useful having, you know, a sense of the other costs that are associated with not having them there. And, you know, I know that's about 60,000, so about just a little less than 10% of the overall savings by removing them. And again, you don't have to answer, but, you know, if you do have a recommendation for us, you know, I certainly would appreciate it, but no pressure. I realize that you're providing us information. We, of course, will take it away and consider it, but I must say this, I'm out of my depth here in terms of really understanding, you know, what is necessary, what is needed, and appreciating that we are going from a pandemic which required additional cleaning, to something different than we were used to, even pre-pandemic.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I could I could say so many things. What would I recommend? So I will tell you this, and I encourage all of my staff to agree with me. I have zero custodial experience. I've never done it a day in my life, and the people that know it are the people that are out there doing it. Our night staff is under a lot of pressure. They have big areas to clean. And if you ask me starting on day one what I thought, I would say that's where your biggest bang for your buck is. But I've got to know a lot of the day custodians out there, and I hear the stories coming from the kids, and I hear the stories coming from the principals and the teachers and how valued they are in the day. And it's hard for me to devalue either position because I see the value in both of them. But yeah, I would just what would I recommend? I would recommend that you put some thought into it and ask the questions, and if you can find a way, if there's money to be had, I think I would need more time to make a decision. And so I think like being prescriptive in that money going back into the district is is the tough piece. And so I think I'd like a bit of flexibility on it, just so that we can make the right decision for the kids, which is what we're here for. So that's kind of it's my lame answer that doesn't get you what you wanted, which is my recommendation, but it gives you the information that I feel right now. Thanks.
Yeah, not at all. And if I may, Chair, I just, thank you so much. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, at the end of the day, often when we're making budget decisions, not being experts necessarily in the area where we're making budget decisions, we really rely on the advice and recommendations of the experts in the field, so to speak. So I appreciate that your thoughts and your words, and wanting some flexibility on how you might redeploy any extra resources that we might be able to come up with. But I'm sure that if we have any other questions about the impacts or what is needed and need some more expertise around custodial services, then I'm sure trustees will let our superintendent know. But thank you, Mr. Baggett. I really appreciate your report. It was incredibly helpful.
Thanks.
Okay. Trustee Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. For Mr. Baggett, thank you very much for the very informative presentation, as well as your laying out of your information. Just a question regarding the effective square feet per FTE in that column number 1, with the reverting back to the previous ways, with it being 31,448 square feet. Just wondering if there was anything coming from your staff about whether or not that was a strain on their capabilities. Just noting that that's the highest amount of square feet per FTE option provided, and wondering whether or not that is something that needs to be considered if we were asking too much previously of staff.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a tough metric, effective square footage per FTE. Other districts don't use the term effective in it. They just say square foot per FTE, typically because they're dealing with very few day custodians in their districts. And what we noticed is by using that value, it doesn't effectively say what our cleaning area assignments are like. And the reason that number goes up slightly for the reintroduction of day custodians is because day custodians have access to cleaning area for only about 3.5 out of their 8 hours of the day. That's when students and staff are not in those areas. And so when I say effective cleaning area, it's the day custodian is doing other things through the day, which actually mitigate a lot of the cleanliness issues. When they're able to do things like take care of kindergarten and grade 1 desks at lunchtime, and when they're able to run the broom down the hallway to keep the dirt towards the doors as opposed to ingressing further into the building, those are pieces where you don't see that in the square footage per FTE. And so I wouldn't say that people felt more strain when the day custodians were in the building. They were able to do things that made it easier for the night staff. When you have a day custodian in a school and they have 2 night staff, they're able to provide materials, make sure that things are taken care of and the lunchtime garbage is taken out of the way and all those things are cleaned up, and that the staff have someone there to help them out through the day. As soon as you remove them at 11 a.m., things start going squirrely and the schools start degrading a little bit. And that's where I think the night staff have really felt it, because the schools haven't had that kind of ongoing maintenance through the day. Anyway, that's my easiest answer. I totally get that the number goes up, and then you would think it would go down, but that's the reason for it. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Cindy Rumpf, GVTA.
Thanks. From what I'm hearing from my members in the GVTA, there's been some concerns about cleaning up biohazards, particularly in cold and flu season, and not being able to clean it right away in classrooms. But I'm just wondering, can you explain number 2 again? I didn't quite understand it. Is that okay?
Yes, number 2. Sorry, which number 2 are we talking about here?
It says 2 bridge 19 plus.
Oh, you
bridge
want,
minus
sorry.
10.
Yep.
The operation, sorry. Yeah.
Got it. Sorry. Number 2 bridge is what I was looking for in that solution was halfway between a day custodian and an evening custodian. So if we've got our day custodians right now splitting off at 11 to go to their other school, they wouldn't do that, but the other school would get someone coming in at 11 that would carry through until about 8 at night. If any of the members of QP3A2 are listening right now, there's nothing in the contract that allows this. So there's going to be huge, this will be a ripple effect of communication and bargaining and all that stuff that needs to go with it. But it is essentially a midday shift. It starts before the lunch and ends in the evening. I don't even know if there's people that are interested in this shift. It's just, that's what it would look like. Sorry, totally. Yeah, out of left field, totally. And yes, that's what the bridge shift looks like. Thanks.
Thank you.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, sorry, I just dawned on me that I did have one more question. I wondered, so what happens, you know, at the elementary level when there is, you know, a biohazard to clean up? Is it literally left until the evening shift when a custodial member would come in and address it? Or are you saying that other staff are deployed during the day to travel to that elementary school to address it?
So currently, if the custodian has left school A and gone to school B and something happens at school A, our intention is for the school to call the custodian back to that site. And they are traveling back to the site and dealing with the mess and going back to the other school. That's the plan. Sometimes the call isn't made. Sometimes the custodian's not there and it's happening after 2:30. And we need to get someone else to take care of it. Sometimes like if it's right at the end of the day, if it's at 3 o'clock and something happens, it goes to the night staff, unfortunately. They're the ones that are going to be going to site earlier before anyone else gets there. So, but no, if it happens midday, the custodians are trying to bounce back between 2 schools to get it done.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Mark. I see no hands, so I'm going to talk. I often, and it's probably grossly inaccurate, but I think about, when I think about custodians, I think about lighthouse keepers and all the debate that we had years back about automating lighthouse keepers or lighthouses and doing away with the human aspect of it. And I have to say that it's, you know, certainly in my children's elementary school experience, Mr. Tellier, he got a Christmas card just like every teacher because he was an integral part of that school. He was always an extra set of hands. He was always on site to see what was going on in the hallways. There's so many things outside of the job description that our custodians contribute to the well-being of our schools. There are no small jobs in this organization, and I think I can comfortably speak for all the members on the board to say that we really do appreciate our custodial staff and the excellent work that they do. One thing I was wondering about, with respect to run sizes, you know, you were able to refer to another district's run size, and I was wondering, is this sort of information actually available, or is this a one-off that you simply had access to because of your connections?
It's a colleague. I'm
okay.
I'm in touch with other folks in other districts on the island, especially. We meet as often as 2 to 3 times a year. We've got a really good group. I do have data from several different districts on the island. We do have the largest run areas, and
okay.
And the group that I did show, they do have the smallest. So I am comparing apples and oranges right now. But
yeah,
I wanted to demonstrate that it is possible, but it's a long stretch from where we are today.
No, I appreciate that. And it also occurs to me that when I think about some of the schools that I visited, they're very different configurations. And, I think of, for example, George J. and the number of stairs involved in that one, and how the effective floor area, it takes on a whole other dimension when you're talking about carrying equipment up and down stairs to access different landings, and the difference between that and a one-story rancher style school that might be a little easier to lug equipment around in. So I know I do appreciate that there's a lot of considerations. But thank you very much for this presentation. I think a lot of us have felt it, or well, all of us have found it valuable, and you've given us plenty of food for thought. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on to Finance Administration, K1, our monthly financial report.
Thank you. So in the agenda package, we have the monthly financial report for November 2022. As mentioned before, this is a report that we pull out of our system, and the prior year was actually what was reported to the Ops Committee last December. And the current year, I ran the reports as at November 29th, 2022. Just so you know, we didn't run month end until December 2nd. So it doesn't have everything in there, but it probably is fairly comparable to the prior year, as the December timeline for meetings is always compressed. So it probably doesn't have the whole month. Let's see. If we look at the revenue for the current year, we're looking at 63%. And that's the revenue, the percentage of the revenue budget that's not received yet. It's at 63%, and last year it was at 60%. And if we look at the expenses, the total on the second page, so this is the percentage of the budget that's available to spend. And we're at 68% in the current year compared to 66% in the prior year. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions that are specific to this report.
Recognize Trustee Kwan.
I just a couple of quick questions. First of all, I just wondered why offshore students' tuitions was negative for this past month. And then the second question was just around in the expenses, on the expenses side, what agent fees were.
Okay, sure. So what often happens at this time of year for international is when they receive the tuition revenue from the international students, and they're anticipating coming in this current school year, they'll recognize the revenue in. Then what happens is they don't always get their study permit, or they might decide to defer to the next fiscal year instead. And so you'll see that revenue move out of revenue and into deferred revenue. And the agent fees?
Yes, please.
So agent fees, so those are, what happens in international education is they often use agents to help them recruit students. And so in the, I believe it's the first and second year, they pay agents a commission for recruiting students on their behalf. And then usually, I think in the third, if they stay longer than that, there's no further commission. So it's really just to get students into the district.
Okay, thank you so much. I noticed that the budget had doubled basically this year to last year. So I was just curious about that. But.
Yeah, so I think they were anticipating higher enrollment this year. And so as their revenue increases, their agent fees increase along with it.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
My apologies. I was looking at the agenda package. So if anyone had their hands up, I missed it. Anybody else? Okay, I have a couple questions, and I apologize if I look like I'm looking somewhere else. I'm trying to pull up the agenda package at the same time. Has there been any change in the local education agreements? That it just struck me that perhaps, I don't know if it was delivery dates or something else that might have changed with when we were receiving them.
I don't think that anything has changed, but the dollar amounts do change because it's based on the nominal roll, which is the formal enrollment of Indigenous students. And so often what happens is we set the budget up and we invoice based on the prior year, because the nominal roll isn't actually confirmed until May. And then you'll see that the budget, well, the budget won't change, but the actual LEA revenue will change.
Okay. Oh, thank you for that. And then I was just wondering, I asked the question last month, God, it's been a month already, about revenue, the cafeteria revenue, and you explained how in the budget change report that we're adjusting how that's actually tracked. Will we be seeing the numbers for that line item, for example, to change after the amended budget, or are we going to continue to be comparing it against last year's and basically seeing the same layout that we're seeing right now?
Probably what will happen at final budget is we'll look to see where the cafeteria revenue is at that time, and then do a projection based on what we're seeing in the first part of the year, and just see if we're expecting to go beyond the 100,000 that we initially budgeted. So if we're already, say for example, sometimes what happens is in February we're already at 90,000, and we know for sure we're going to have several more months of at least 10,000. So we'll adjust the budget in the final budget for that.
Okay. Thank you. And then one last question. Line 654, the parking fees. I'm just trying to make sense of how it seemed like last year we anticipated a smaller amount and ended up receiving a larger amount, and this year it seems to be the reverse. So can you give me a sense of what's going on with those?
Sure. Yeah. When we're creating the final budget for rental, so that includes the parking fees, so rental parking spots, often we will base it on the prior year, because it's not, unless we have specific spots that are rented out. So we actually work really closely with Mark Baggett. The rentals falls under his area, and they do an assessment of parking spaces and what they anticipate. But it is, as you know, it can be a bit of a guess. So we might lose parking spaces like we did at Big High, or we might gain parking spaces elsewhere. So it's really just our best estimate. So probably what we did is we based the current year's budget on last year's actuals, and they're just not coming in at the same amount at this point. That could change by the end of the year.
No, and I do appreciate it's a relatively small amount within the scope of the budget, but I just wanted to get a sense of what we were looking at there. So thank you very much. I see no other questions, so I guess we'll move on to the budget change report then.
So the budget change report provided there also, believe this was done on November 30th. And I'll just highlight the items that are new, and that would be in the changes section under changes amended budget, the last 4 items. Most significantly would be we received a check from the GVTA It is related to unused remedy from the 2019-2020 fiscal year. So those are release minutes that teachers receive from being in classrooms where there's class size and composition issues that can't be resolved. So they get these extra release minutes. At that time, we made an agreement with them to just write them a check, and they were going to use that funding to support their members through COVID. In the end, they didn't use a lot of that money, and so they've returned it back to the district to be used for teacher staffing. And my understanding is that allocations to schools for teacher staffing will be done jointly between the school district and the GVTA. So that's where you see that 390,000. We're bringing it in as revenue because it's coming in from an external organization, and then we'll have offsetting expenses. Miscellaneous donations and revenues. So that's the addition for the month of November. Same with cafeteria, and also a few more Cooper Smith Music Library donations. So those are the only changes in operating. Do you have any questions on operating before I move on? Nope.
I'm not seeing any hands, so please proceed.
Okay. A couple new additions on the special purpose. And the first one is the First Nations Student Transportation Grant. So this is a ministry grant that we receive each year to support transportation for the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. There was also some funds that were unspent at the end of last year, and given this is a special purpose fund, we were able to carry those forward and use them in the current year. So that will be used for busing to and from school and also extracurricular activities. And the last one, you heard Charmaine talk about this. It's the Early Childhood Education Dual Credit Program. And this is the ministry grant came in at 82,000, plus there was also 50,000 left over at the end of last year, which we are permitted to use in the current year. And those will all go to pay for tuition at Camosun for their courses. And that's it for special purpose.
And just wondering, with respect to the First Nations Transportation Grant and the Early Childhood Grant, the amount that we're porting over from last year, is that the full amount? Or like, are we kind of looking at a situation where we may have more funds in the current year than we will have in the year to come? Or are we is there an expectation of a bit of flow through where we'll be able to maintain consistent levels for a while yet?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. Based on the budget that's been put in there, it looks like it's expected to be spent in this year, but I guess again, like best laid plans, it's possible that there could be some remaining at the end of the year, which would then move forward to the next year if we're permitted by the ministry.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that's about as accurate as we can ever be in a situation like this. So thank you very much. Last chance, and seeing none, thank you very much for your report. We'll move on to facilities planning. Start off with an operations update.
Sorry, wait, thank you. Okay, a few updates. So metal shops are in progress. I know Trustee Duncan asked about this last few weeks ago. So they're currently at Lambert Park. They've moved all the equipment out that can be moved out, and they're now moving the equipment around and hooking it up. And then they'll move on to a next shop. All the safety lines for the metal shop and the aviation will be done in the summertime because they have to decrease the areas in order to put down the safety lines. So they won't be done until the summertime. So that's kind of the mark to hit, is to having all the metal shops and the aviation done is in the summer. We did have a little bit, unfortunately, we had a little bit of fire in Central Middle School. It's cleaned up. We do have to gut the bathroom due to smoke damage. We don't think the cost is going to be more than $10,000, but the fire department and the facilities crew did a great job at getting the water actually out of the building. So that was positive. Minor capital is continuing on with the childcare sites. There's 5 in progress now. We just got the building permit for Mackenzie. So like I said, Eagleview and View Royal will be open in September. That's the target date, with the rest of them in January of 2024. Think about that date. Operations is seeing lots of absenteeism right now. It's mainly due to the cold and flu season, but they're continuing to hire to try and mitigate that. And anytime they have like elementary is short, they'll take it from high school, and they take it from facilities, and they take it from TOMI, and they try and get that elementary cleaned. NCIS, that's Network and Communication Group. They're experienced long delays like everybody else is in all the delivery of the materials. So their team is currently focusing on the network phone and PA upgrades. The energy manager has expanded his Lights Out sticker campaign to other schools. So we're going to see a lot of those awesome stickers on all our light switches soon. LED upgrades are progressing well. Northridge, Esquimalt, and Tillicum are nearing completion, and View Royal is just getting started. And I think I put some of the questions in your guys' pack up for that you asked last time regarding Cedar Hill Middle School. They'll have MERV 13 filters. There's no plans to purchase electric buses. We don't need them for the larger 72 seaters, and the little buses. The technology just isn't there yet to take with it home. Is there any questions?
Trustee Carmichael. And then Trustee Duncan after that.
Thank you. This question is just regarding the light switch covers. I saw the pictures of them in the pack up, and they were pretty obviously paper, right? So I'm just wondering if the new light switch covers are going to be something more durable, like a plastic, because they get touched every day, twice a day, and so it's obvious that they're going to see some wear and tear. And I just wondered if we had upgraded the material that we were going to use for those.
No, right now for the pilot project, they're just doing it. They're stickers. So they're pretty durable stickers, and they can put a film on it. We put it on our tech package stickers too. They're pretty hard to actually, I can't even take a knife to it and peel it off. So they're pretty durable. So that's the plan right now. There's 5 cents to make. So they're not that expensive. So bringing it up to a plastic or a metal will just increase the cost. So it being a pilot, I know Brian's looking at everything, and every school seems to be really excited about doing it. So I think once you see more wear and tear, he might be looking into something different. But right now, we're just getting the kids excited is number one.
Yeah, and at 5 cents, I think you could probably just slap another one over it, right? Okay, Thanks for that, Money.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks again, Marnie, for including the answers to all the questions we asked last time. It was super helpful. And it'll assist us going back to folks who are asking us those questions. I just had a quick query around the wood shops. And I wondered where we are with the dust extraction units at Esquimalt in particular, but if there are any other schools where we're still waiting for those units.
So Esquimalt is actually in our 5-year capital plan. We do not find out to the ministry until about March what's being funded. So I don't really have an update besides it's in the 5-year capital plan. Hopefully it's funded this year. The rest of them, we have to get it onto the 5-year capital plan. So none of them are in the progress of being funded.
And if I may share just a quick follow-up.
Please.
Thanks. I just wonder if we could, as part of tracking the shop remediations and upgrades, whether we could have a list of the shops that we're still waiting to replace those dust extraction, or to, I guess it's not just a matter of replacing, as it is probably also a matter of installing. I'm not sure, but yeah, if we could track that. I think it's important that we keep the board's focus on considering these safety items as part of our capital planning and budget process.
Sure. Do you want them tracked? It might be an easier list of which ones have been upgraded, because there's 3 so far, to track it that way, or do you want to list on what hasn't been upgraded?
Sadly, I'm more concerned with what hasn't, although I appreciate that we've got 3, but I think for our purposes, it's the ones we haven't been able to upgrade, where our board is gonna have to turn our proverbial minds to how we're gonna fund it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the next ops report.
Thanks again.
Okay, seeing no more, I guess we'll move on then to Vic High School seismic project update.
Okay, it's me again. Sorry, just give me 2 seconds. My apologies. Okay. So it is progressing well. The project is progressing well. As everybody heard, the updated occupancy is now for January 2024. In response to I cannot get the sentence out. In response to delays in material and labor shortages. So tender packages 1 through 9 have been completely tendered and awarded, and we're still working on the final tender package for number 10, which is the finish carpentry. So inside the building, the steel stud framing is installations underway, as is the interior drywall. The installation of the ceiling support anchor grid is almost completed, and the mechanical and the electrical rough-in that includes the HVAC and the sprinklers is progressing really well. They are starting to repair the interior walls where some plaster had fallen off throughout the school, so that's progressing well. Our facility guys, we took actually the millwork for the whole entire project in-house to save a little over $1 million. And that's progressing well. We should be complete by the end of the month. And then in December, I guess we're December now. In January, we'll actually see our team actually go into Vic High and start to install the millwork and start to install tech packages inside the school. So the rooms are starting to look like rooms now. We're getting painting and flooring installed as well. They're completing work on the NLC, the multi-purpose room, the concrete bleachers. The auditorium design, it's being completed for the update for the stage for all the accessibility upgrades. Work's continuing on the exterior. The new windows are being installed. Stained glass refurbishment and the brick terracotta upgrades are progressing well. We're starting work on the Gladstone and Grant Street sidewalk upgrades. The parking lot grading and curbing is underway. The sports field curbing and fencing is nearing completion. The volleyball court drainage is underway. And they're installing the sports field base gravel, and the shot pad will be happening soon. And then the turf field will be installed in the spring or summer when the weather dries up. So that's a long-winded update, but there's a lot going on and it's progressing really well. Questions?
Okay, well, I've got a couple, never to be short. One thing I was surprised, and when I looked at this, I noticed it seemed like only $56K in billing over the past month. And I appreciate that, there can be lots of reasons for that, but it struck me when we were building a house that there was never a delay in actually submitting the billing. So I guess it surprises me at this point in time that seems like a relatively low number given the magnitude of the project. And do you have any observations about that?
No, we do progress claims every single month. So our architect and the construction manager work together, and they'll only pay for work that's completed. So they work really hard on going through every single bill. Every person on site is justified. All their hours are justified, and that is exactly what we pay. So we have the backup document to support all the invoices that are received, and that's just what we pay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if some work is in progress but not complete, then it wouldn't show up in this one?
Correct.
Okay.
So there's lots of times where we've tendered out something and it's been committed, but it hasn't been paid to them yet because the work hasn't been fully completed.
Okay, and thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense, actually. One thing I was wondering about, in the write-up, it was saying that 79.75 million was fully allocated, but when I looked at the table at the bottom, the number was 83.76-ish. And I was wondering if this is the distinction between what the province is contributing and what the district is contributing, or if there's something else entirely that I'm just not getting.
No, it's kind of written in there a little bit. We've gone back to the ministry and asked for another risk reserve because the project is coming over budget with all the materials overages. So the ministry is aware of some of the price overages, and most of our tenders, I would say, have been $1 million+ over. So we have monthly progress reports with the ministry to keep them completely up to date on the spending of the project. So they're well aware, but some of the risk requests that we have to do the ministry could take us, 3 or 4 months to do. They're not really simple requests, they're quite cumbersome. So we submitted one for quite a lot of money just recently, and we're hoping to hear something for them soon. We know we're going to get something, it's just how much we're going to get. So we're committed a little bit more than the $79 million. We're still value engineering, and we'll continue to value engineer no matter what money the province gives us. We just need to make sure at the end of the day it's a safe school for the students.
Okay, and you'll be letting us know if where that value engineering may come in, just so that we're not surprised. And
100%.
it goes without saying, but maybe I should say it. Thank you so much. Like, I can't even imagine the complexity of trying to stay on top of a project like this, and we appreciate the updates that you are able to provide and the way that you can field questions sort of off the top like that.
Thanks. It's been a learning experience.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Thank you very much, Barney. Have a good night.
Welcome.
And we have no public disclosure of in-camera. On to new business, policy subcommittee, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let me just go to the pack up. So, so the motion is under N1. The Board of Education of SD61, Greater Victoria, direct the policy subcommittee to review the current policies regarding legal services and make recommendations to the board as needed to the board. And so I've been thinking about this and the need to review our legal services and how we procure legal services, and my thinking around this, it started some time ago, but I think the urgency with which I think we need to do a review really came about after, seeing the escalating costs around legal services over the past year. And knowing that, given all the financial constraints that all school districts are facing, but we are facing as well, and those escalating legal costs, that it's probably time for us to review our policy. So our existing policy dates back to 1982, with the last revision being in 1983. For folks who may have gone and had a look at the existing policy, there are some review requirements in it. The current policy sets out that a review of any appointment should occur at least every 3 years. There are some requirements set out in the current policy around board reporting and oversight that I think we need to revisit, and through the lens of ensuring that whatever policy we settle on, it's consistently applied and everybody's on the same page with what's required. And then I was also minded in bringing this to the board for consideration that at the moment we don't have any accompanying regulation. And it may be that the policy committee, in looking at this, may well, recommend that a regulation be established in addition, just to help guide the implementation of how legal services are procured. So I'm happy to, hopefully that provides enough of a rationale for folks to understand why I'm bringing it forward and why I think it's, really important that we do this work. But I'm happy to answer questions.
Trustee McNally?
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but what I would request from the policy committee is a list of policy reviews that have been sent that way and have been, percolating and moved from burner to burner, if you all accept that metaphor or analogy or whatever. The policy committee has had a lot of work to do, and some things haven't been finished. I recognize the primacy of a review of legal services though, and I'm completely behind it and support the motion. I would just ask for a list of other things that the policy committee is going to deal with when they have time.
Okay.
You know,
So-
things they've been tasked with in the past and just haven't got to. It takes a long time. I was on that committee for a while, and in order to write good policy, you can't do it quickly.
Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of address Trustee McNally's point, and I totally agree. I think that my hope is that all of our ad hoc committees or subcommittees will be, doing regular reporting out. And trustees that are part or members of committees should be doing their reporting out in, I believe it's June and December moving forward. So yeah, it's really important to keep on top of the work and just to be clear that everyone knows what progress is being made and what's outstanding. So I expect that will be coming to the board.
Okay. And just for my own clarification, Trustee Duncan, would you see this as being sort of a two-stage item as getting an update on what the current policies and possibly practices, if we don't have much in the way of policy direction, are, and then in addition to that, recommendations based on that update? Is that a fair interpretation of this?
Yeah, I would expect that the policy committee would come back to the board with an overview of what exists currently, and then a suite of potential recommendations. Yeah, so I guess it's fair to say that it would be two stages. I would hope that that would come back to in one report back to the board. Yeah, but yeah.
Thank you for that. Looking for any further comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion that the Board of Education School District 61 direct the policy subcommittee to review the current policies regarding legal services and make recommendations as needed to the board. So ops members, and that is unanimous. Moving on, I have no notice of motions or general announcements. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I do have, apologies, I do have a notice of motion. I just will send, I guess maybe in the chat might be easier for staff who want to copy that for the purposes of the minute, and also for my colleagues and the stakeholders and rights holders around the table. Just a notice of motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, direct the superintendent to work with Victoria Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils, VCPAC, to develop a communication protocol to support Parent Advisory Council, PAC, to communicate with PAC members in their school communities. And that's just for the January Ed Policy meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Seeing no further notices of motion and no general announcements, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Trustee Kwan. All those in favor? Have a wonderful night, everyone.